OTB AM.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters.
Bang on 7:30 this morning. You're very welcome along to OTB AM. It's GIlroy and Eoin Sheahan with you all the way through until 10 o'clock. We're here every weekday morning from 7:30 until 10. If you want a live continuous stream on our radio station, then head over to the OTB Sports app. Hit the radio button and it's 24 hours of non-stop radio. And today, it's a big Jack Charlton special, obviously at 12:30. Like every other radio station in the country, we're going to be playing Put 'Em Under Pressure as Jack's funeral begins around about 12:30. And we've a special looking back on all of the coverage that we've had for you, building up to around about that, which kicks off at 12 noon today. So make sure you get over to our radio station, or you can tell your Alexa to play OTB Sports Radio and tune in. And funnily enough, that's exactly what she'll do for you. Now, brilliant show lined up for you today. A little bit later on, we're going to be doing what should have been done nationally a long time ago. We're splitting Dublin north and south. Today it's the start of our discussions about who should be on Dublin's Mount Rushmore. We're going to finish this up on Thursday when we merge them back again. But we're picking the north today, the south tomorrow, and the full mountain itself on Thursday. Sean Potts is going to help us to split Dublin a little bit later on in the show. Graham Hunter is going to join us to talk to us about the end of La Liga season. We'll talk about the absence of a Ballon d'Or this year and who that's going to impact most. We'll talk about the Gareth Bale situation, and we might also talk about how Marcelo Bielsa was forged in La Liga. All of that coming up a little bit later on for you, around about 8:20. And then, as we've said, it is splitting Dublin into two, and we'll be talking about that. Some of the big stories coming out in terms of Irish football and its future over the next while that we'll be getting into on this morning's show. But at 7:32, I want to bring you this from last night. It's David Priest, a goalkeeping coach, a goalkeeping expert, talking about the travails of David De Gea and whether or not it's a technical issue or a mental issue or a little bit of both. Have a look.
For more, we're joined by David Priest, a former goalkeeper, over 250 professional appearances. He's now working as a coach over in Sweden with Östersunds, and you'll know him from his media work as well. David, great to have you on. Thanks so much for your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
So just to set the context here, I think we all know just how good De Gea was, but I want to get your thoughts on how you rated him. Signed for United in 2011, 4 times United's Player of the Year. Real Madrid obviously were chasing him relentlessly for a period there. When he was at his best, are we talking about the best goalkeeper in the world here?
Yeah, I think so. And I think when you talk about world-class goalkeepers, you're talking about keepers who make a big difference to the side. And for, I think, 3 or 4 seasons, you just got to look at the stats. His performance has meant that he was saving his side 10 to 14 goals every season, and that can be huge. It makes, especially at the top of the division, it can make a huge difference. And in the time that he was under Louis van Gaal, of course, he was the football was maybe not great, but he was given a precise job to do, almost similar to the job that Nick Pope does with Burnley, and he did it very well. And from that perspective, like I said, he's world class in making a difference to his team.
He went to the World Cup in 2018 seemingly at the top of his game. There was the goal he conceded from the Ronaldo shot, dreadful error, by his standards, and it's generally agreed that since then we've seen a slump or a propensity to make some really high-profile mistakes that he wasn't making before. So statistically, for instance, if you go back to the start of last season, there have been 7 errors leading directly to goals, in so much as whoever puts the statistics together judges these things. But 7 errors leading directly to goals in the Premier League alone, and only Newcastle's Dubravka has made more of those types of mistakes. That's an unbelievable turnaround. What are you seeing with this guy's game at the moment?
I think in his all-round game, if you look over the last, say, 6-7 months, certainly to the start of December, you have a keeper who, in between these mistakes, is not conceding many goals. I think from the start of the year, they've conceded 16 goals. 9 of those have been 3 games against Chelsea, Man City, and Liverpool. So there is spells where the team's not conceding goals. Now, of course, that's down to defence as well. I think, except for Wolves, they've limited sides to the least amount of quality chances in the Premier League. So of course that helps. But again, that puts a big onus on the goalkeeper being there when he's needed. And it has to be said, you can say about mistakes or errors that people have flagged up, but it's the goals that are just below that level, the goals where you think that a keeper of his level should be saving, and there's been far too many of those. You have the big errors, the error against Everton where he strikes the ball off Calvert-Lewin. You have the goal at Watford where it inexplicably goes through his hands. But again, like the first goal against Chelsea yesterday, that is a save that 3 or 4 years ago he was making. Now, we can talk about techniques and things like that, but the first thing that stops him from saving the ball is his decision-making. This decision-making in his reaction to a response to the problem that's in front of him. Like I said, the first goal would be one that he'd save, that he'd come, maybe spread himself more, be more aggressive and block and be closer to the finish so he doesn't leave as much open. And the second goal, again, we can see it's technique. His arms should be further away from his body, and when your arms are close into your body, it's much more difficult to catch the ball. And we can say these are technique, but it's probably just like I said, decision making, that it's that where things have whether it's situations, whether it's the mistakes that are accumulating, that's what's affecting him, and it's affecting his decision-making process and leading to these mistakes. And like I said, that they're not even the huge mistakes. The near post goal from a few weeks ago, where he's caught slightly out of position. You're looking at a very tight angle. If you draw a line from the ball to the centre of the goal, that really should be ideal positioning. But he was slightly off centre, and you leave the tiniest gap. And at this level, in Premier League level, you're going to get punishes. There's consequences to these imperfections.
So that's the Stanislas goal you're talking about, the one at the near post.
Yeah,
and then yesterday, the first goal, again at the near post, you're saying his decision-making. So he'd be more aggressive, he'd be off his line more, he'd spread himself more. That's the point you're making, is it?
Yeah, I mean, like the technique they employed in that Stanislas goal, it's the right technique to use. He has a great blocking technique. He covers a lot of the goal. There's it's like I don't know, you can put it like a K. He puts his body in a position like the letter K, and so it stops it going through his legs, and it gives him a chance to keep his face forward and to react with his arms as well. But it's about employing those tactics at the right time. It's about, are you close enough for it to be effective? And again, from yesterday, if he can be a little bit more aggressive in his positioning, where he's closer to the finish and he employs that technique, then it gives Giroud less of the goal to aim at. And in that position where he's a little bit deeper, he's maybe trying to give himself a little bit of time to react. But of course, it's that close, a little bit of any pace on the ball, it doesn't have to be a great shot to beat you.
Generally, all sports people, when they talk about decision-making, if they're confident, decision-making is one of the most natural and easiest aspects of the game, whatever the sport, and yet when they're low on confidence or they're having psychological issues, whatever they may be, suddenly that decision-making becomes very conscious and very difficult, and they are unsure of themselves. So that would suggest there is some confidence slump with De Gea, which is ongoing now for quite a while. That's the worrying part here. I mean, if we wouldn't have done this piece a year ago, and certainly not 2 years ago on the back of a couple of mistakes, it's actually just, it's added up over quite a long period of time now, and it makes you worry that this guy isn't going to find his way out of this.
Well, that's it. I think a lot of people in sort of athletics and in sport in general, they talk about being in the zone, and it's almost a state where everything's just automatic, and there's no you don't have to think about anything. You immediately respond to the problem that's in front and the challenge that's in front of you. But I think that's when you've got to look further afield to just the coaching. Goalkeeping coaches can have an influence, but they would never take ownership of a performance. Performance is entirely down to the goalkeeper. He's had lots of changes in this in the 11 years that he's been at United. I mean, you're looking at probably 5 goalkeeping coaches in that time. He's had very experienced. We talked about the time at under Louis van Gaal. He had Frans Hoek, who's a godfather of goalkeeping coaching. So maybe he did have an influence there. He lost his mentor from his early days at Atletico Madrid, was brought in by Jose Mourinho. He left the club under a little bit of a cloud. There there's some rumours of the club weren't happy with his behaviour, and now he has Rich Hartless, who's head of the goalkeeper at Manchester United now, and Craig Mawson, who's been brought from Burnley. So there's changes in the background there, but to get in this, you talk about the mindset of an athlete to get into this zone. A lot of it can be to do with preparation and how you approach the games, and there's been lots of things around it. You know, the contract situation for a couple of seasons, the on-off move to Madrid, to Real, and all these can play a part. But ultimately, it's the responsibility of it doesn't matter who you are, goalkeeper, athlete, tennis player. You have to get in that frame of mind, that mindset to perform. And we can all take as goalkeepers. We can accept mistakes. In fact, we must know that mistakes are going to be made. But it's dealing with those mistakes and what happens in between those mistakes. And if you've got a keeper who makes the odd mistake, which we all do, but in between the payoff is somebody who has an effect on the team, a positive effect on the team, then they can be swept under the carpet. But like I said, there's too many high-profile mistakes and too many situations. I hate the phrase where he should do better, but that's simply the case.
Mark Bosnich was talking about his technique, and he said from a technical point of view he seems to be pushing all his balance going forward with his feet, especially for the second goal yesterday. That's the Mason Mount one. You pretty much saw that again. That's why he dived backwards. Once you start diving backwards as a goalkeeper, you're in big trouble. And there is no doubt, when I watch him, a defining image is often him on his heels, feet ready to come up to help with the save. Now, it seemed for a number of years this was celebrated as his own brilliant, authentic way of going about his business, and that worked from then. So, I don't know, do you look at his... This is a strange thing to say about the keeper who was the best in the world for a time. Do you look at his fundamentals and think they are liable technically to let him down? They are high wire acts?
I think you sort of made a great point there, because we can always say that with his technique that his arm swing can be a hindrance, his wide leg stance that seems to have adopted in the last couple of seasons can be a hindrance. But those are the same techniques that have gotten to where he is, and that can enable him to make great saves. The arm swing, you can see it employed when he's famous for that save up to his top left-hand corner where he does the overhand, a top-hand save. It doesn't affect him when he's making those sort of saves. And Mark's right about that. It's when you look at diving technique, of course, in a perfect situation that you are diving forward, but there's much more of the mechanics that goes into that. A lot of it's head position. If your head's going forward, then your whole body follows obviously. But again, like I said, about in that instance, catching the ball further out in front of you, it makes a hell of a difference, simply because you can adjust to anything like a bouncing ball, any movement on the ball, you can adjust, whereas your arms are closer into your body. You tend to go backwards. That's the motion that you're going to be making. And then it's much more difficult to hold the ball when it comes in here, and you often find that it comes away from you and you're giving up second chances, or it's going straight in the net as it did yesterday.
So when is it one mistake too many? When you're Ole Gunnar Solskjaer and you've got two absolutely crucial games coming up, and you've got Romero there, who maybe isn't capable of making the spectacular save that De Gea is, but at the same time is maybe unlikely to drop in a clanger?
I think in this situation, there's obviously politics involved as well, because, David De Gea is top earner at Manchester United, possibly the top earner in the Premier League. There's a lot of investment gone into him. But you're right, they need results to try and get themselves in the Champions League. Romero is an experienced goalkeeper, very rarely let them down in the situations that he's being brought in. And again, if he was brought into the team, that would be the same situation. But as regards to further down the line in the future, like I said, there's been a big financial outlay to David De Gea and his new contract and keep him at the club. But if he's not performing at the level that he was when that contract was warranted, then they have to look at the situation and they have to see that it's not financially viable, especially when they have a keeper who's performing in a limited time. We have to say this about Dean. He's come through League One, Championship and Premier League now. He's performed consistently at each level, but a very small sort of space of time where he's performed at this high level. So it's perhaps a little bit too early to say that he's the one that's going to be the number one down the line ahead of De Gea.
Yeah.
But certainly a situation that they need to look at.
Do you look at De Gea and just worry that his confidence is shot, to put a crude way of summing it up? And that's not to say he won't have very good games here and there, but that he just fundamentally is damaged now. These mistakes have accrued, and he hasn't managed to deal with them, because that is the big worry right now.
It is, and you know what, for a goalkeeper and a goalkeeper watching someone who you could see who, like you said, is shot and devoid of confidence. There's nothing worse to watch. It's almost, you can cringe, you can feel the emotions that are going on inside them. But I think that at this level, someone like David De Gea, with all his experience, I don't get that feeling at all.
Okay.
And like I said, in between these mistakes, you're still seeing the David De Gea that we saw 3-4 years ago. But again, it's about consistency, and these mistakes, like I said, he's not showing to me outwardly that he's unconfident, but it's certainly something that, we've spoken about Joe Hart before and about what he's went through, and having maybe he's trying to reset the button to press the reset button to go again and rebuild himself and try and break his game down again. And sometimes you've got to be humble enough to be able to do that and see that's what's needed.
Yeah, well, it's going to be interesting to see the next week for starters, and then where De Gea's career goes. David Priest, thanks so much for your time. Much appreciated.
Thank you very much.
Cheers. We'll take a break. Your take on De Gea and where he is this thing becoming, almost, you don't want to say terminal, but I mean, it's a 2-year slump now, and fixable maybe is the better way to put it. Is this thing likely to be fixed anytime soon?
Well, soon. There's not got long left anyway this season. The temptation might be to leave it to see what happens at the start of next season. The goals at the weekend there, I mean, the first one particularly, you look at the little flick on by Giroud, and it kind of should get to it, but now and again they sneak by you because it's low to the ground, it's from an odd angle, that stuff. And anytime any mistake happens or someone does something, I try to forensically take it apart and explain why it happened, and there usually is a reason. I can't give you one of them for the goal by Mason Mount. I really just can't. He's just there. There's plenty of space. It's not travelling. There is kind of no real concept of an excuse for that. It's just really weird, really bad, really lacking in concentration. And considering, I suppose, the thing that Man United fans, I think, was he the Player of the Year twice?
Four times.
So
4 times.
4 times.
Yeah.
Well, twice ago, I know that for sure, but 4 times. So there's, some good feeling in the bank there. But when you see, certainly your number 2 goalkeeper is better in the air, coming and collect balls. He looks more comfortable when balls are being crossed in the air. That's before you start taking away the fact that he had one thing better than just about anyone else. As a shot stopper, it was stunning. You're actually beginning to lose that a wee bit now. So there's not really an argument for him. If you look at anybody else, goalkeepers seem to be treated differently. But they've got this kind of persona thing going on. If you're not playing well enough, get out, somebody else come in and it's your turn. And then you try and work your way back in again. Shouldn't be any more complicated than that. But because of the numbers, because of the cost, because of the fame side of it, all that stuff, it's all linked in together. It should be much simpler, right? You're not playing well enough, get out. You just keep on working until you're good enough to get back in again, until this guy makes a mistake. But whether that's going to happen, I think they're probably looking at it. We were probably having the similar conversations about Kepa a wee while back, and they make mistakes. They can get away for a few weeks, but you're absolutely right. He's not been at the standard that he had been for a long, long time. And he still has some great saves. He has some great saves against, Chelsea at the weekend. They had a couple very, very good saves. That's not the point. That is definitely not the point. The goalkeepers, that's expected. But you do the bread and butter stuff. You absolutely do that. And he's kind of beginning not to do that. And the fact that he's not great with the ball at his feet either. I mean, there's a lot. No, he seems to be being left behind.
Yeah, it's an amazing fall from grace. So pre-lockdown this season, there was the Watford goal, the Ismailia Sarr ball that just inexplicably went through his hands. There was the clearance, which ricocheted off Dominic Calvert-Lewin. And then post-lockdown, there was the Spurs mistake, and then he was beaten at the near post, Junior Stanislas against Bournemouth, I think it was. None of them on their own are horrific. It's just that it's all adding up. And if you look at the broad stats, I read it earlier on, since the start of last season, there have been 7 errors in the Premier League alone, which have led to goals. Only Martin Dubravka has made more mistakes. You are talking about the guy who was pretty much the best goalkeeper in the world, is the interesting thing. David Priest did not feel that there are fundamental issues with his technique. Now, Mark Bosnich does think there are fundamental issues with his technique. Priest thinks, well, it served him for long enough and certainly well enough. So it's more of a psychological issue. This probably goes back to World Cup 2018. He conceded a really bad goal from a Ronaldo shot. You just wonder, has he lost his nerve in some way, or lost a certain confidence, or is there some a jitteriness there? But he is liable now, and this is the question, if you're Ole Gunnar Solskjaer with 2 massive games upcoming, he is liable now to make a mistake out of nothing, and he can expect lots of shots coming his way over the next 2 games as well. So if you're Ole Gunnar Solskjaer and he says, look, I'm fine, at the back of your mind you must be thinking to yourself, I'm not sure, are you? And you will be looking at Romero.
I'll be honest with you, I'd be going with Romero, and wouldn't even be considering it too much. I would be going with him. He's not done particularly badly any time that I've watched him play, and as I say, there are big parts of his game which are important to Manchester United, where he is stronger, you know, and it is that shot-stopping thing that set him apart. And if that's not working to anywhere near the same level, and it isn't because he's making these mistakes and some more simple ones, then he has to make that decision. But the other side of it, we go all the way back to another Man United goalkeeper. Remember Jim Leighton? I don't know, who was dropped, was it a cup final replay? Yeah. And it destroyed Jim, destroyed the relationship with his manager. The fallout was absolutely enormous. To go back to your initial question, the initial question is, do they lose confidence? Yes, 100%. It's maybe more than anyone else, than any other position. And I've seen it with quite a few of them. There was, you know, even really, really good ones. I can remember the period with Petr Cech. There was a period where every ball that came in the box, it's okay, I started looking away because I know he's going to just come and collect it. He's going to come and catch it. There's not even a thought. There's utter belief, utter confidence, everything. Now, a couple of injuries happened. One very bad injury happened. When he came back after, lots of things were as good. He was never as good at that again. There was an edginess. He started punching stuff that he would always have caught before. And that wasn't I'm going to technically change. That was a part of confidence and something's gone. And I have seen a good number of keepers over the years. It's quite often after an injury, but it's just as likely to be after, you know, they make a number of mistakes, or they might in their own head think, well, this defence in front of me isn't great. Can I go back to one of the stats here? I'm really wary of stats and goalkeepers. I'm really wary because Dubravka had more mistakes than him. I think Dubravka had a brilliant season. The reason being, he's had to do so much more, you know, and there is more stress on errors. Because you can look at Kepa and look at his numbers just now, and his mistakes will be limited, probably. But the percentage of goals that he scored compared to percentage of shots looks awful for him. Looks absolutely dreadful. So you manipulate those stats whatever you want. The one guy I'm actually backing up here is Dubravka.
Okay, that's fair enough. I mean, there might be 10 of his teammates turning to him and saying, geez, thanks a million for that because we're getting off scot-free this morning. Chelsea dominated United. What did you make of the game?
I'm allowed to say I enjoyed it.
You are, yeah?
Yeah, I did, because I was at the Chelsea game against Sheffield United and they get beat and they were bullied and they were outplayed. Tactically a bit out of thought as well. And it was interesting watching and thinking, well, they look very young, those kids out there today, against, a gnarled old outfit and a well-organised and well-structured outfit like Sheffield United, and you think, this could actually fall apart. Frank Lampard's a really interesting thing, which is an unusual thing for managers to say. I learned a lot today. I learned an awful lot today. And I thought, that's unusual, because he's not telling you what he learned. He told you one or two things, like he'd learned that his team weren't loud enough and they needed to be a wee bit stronger personalities and shout a bit more. That's one thing, but it's not what he really learned. So I was interested to see the reaction he had. The reaction he had in the next game against Norwich was get experience in. Absolutely expected that, and expected exactly the same in the semi-final. But the other thing he learned was he went back to the 3-4-3, which everyone spotted, but it was a slightly adapted 3-4-3. And yes, he learned all that thing about the personalities and the strength of them and what they need to deliver, all that stuff. But he did this brilliant technical thing during the game, which after 5 minutes, he spotted it right away. Overloaded their right-hand side all the time, right? So they've got Reece James, right wing-back, hammering down there. Willian, hammering down there. Azpilicueta, centre-back, right centre-back, hammering down there. And they're all going on to a kid. He's a good player. He is a good player. But they're all going on to Williams. And time and again, they're just flooding, overdoing it, overgoing. And the poor kid had nowhere to go. And the crosses were coming in, and Ole Gunnar Solskjaer hadn't changed it. And I'm thinking, Frank, yeah, you did learn something. Exactly what Chris Wilder does all the time. He gets that extra centre halfway back three to overload now and again in some areas. And because it's unexpected, it completely skews everything. And it looked a mess and a shambles. And I'm doing a kind of analysis of the game as we're going along for who I was working for. And I'm saying, I can't believe I'm not seeing this. This is incredible. Because if I'm playing in the left against that, I'm thinking, oh my God. Now, there's lots of other things, Giroud was amazing and all the personal things you can see that are obvious. But that tactical learning thing that Frank had done after such a disaster, and I thought, God, I'm impressed with this. The team had to be right. The tactics had to be right. They got lucky that United, A, had a poor do, and B, didn't put out their strongest side. But tactically, that little thing that he'd done, that twisted it, and they got the first goal out of it, and then they just destroyed them from then on in. So, from a tactical point of view, I was really, really impressed with Chelsea on the occasion.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
The OTB Brief. Everything you need to know about sport every morning. Need to get on top of the day's sports news? Well, the OTB Brief is the only sports update you'll need every morning. With all the breaking stories, post-match reaction.
They had one more day to rest. We were really in trouble to build the team.
And the best bits from off the ball, all in a 10-minute podcast.
Oh, sweaty palms. Of course, you guys know what it's like, but that was nervy, yeah.
The OTB Brief, online every morning from 7 a.m. on offtheball.com, the Go Loud app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters.
And you're very welcome back to OTB AM. It's GIlroy and Eoin Sheahan with you all the way through until 10 o'clock this morning. I just want to tell you about what's coming up today at high noon. We are going to be bringing you a Jack Charlton special, which will include all of the various people that we've spoken to over the last week. So John Giles, Mick McCarthy, Ray Houghton, Jason McAteer, Brian Kerr, Hector Huckagon, Gary Breen, President Michael D. Higgins, and Moya Brennan, who sings in Put 'Em Under Pressure. And at 12:30, we will join in with all the other radio stations around the country and be playing Put 'Em Under Pressure. So as Big Jack Charlton is laid to rest today. As ever, if you want to get in touch with us this morning, 087 9180 180 is the number. Eoin, good morning to you.
Good morning, Ger.
How are you?
Very well. How are you getting on?
I'm good. We're doing something today that should have been done a long time ago. We're splitting Dublin in two. I mean, technically, it should be split in four. I mean, obviously, with the population centres they have, it would be the best thing for everybody if they split it in four. But anyway, two will start.
It will start when people write the encyclopedia on how Dublin was eventually split in two. They will trace the steps back to this very day. And today is the day where it begins, where we start to take the city and actually look at it for what it really is. Two mega cities joined together to make one mega city. So we're going to be chatting to Kenny Cunningham later on for a start, who's going to be going through some of the football contenders from North Dublin. Like the way I see it, there are two major sports in the north side of the city. You've got your GEA, and then you've got your football. Of course, you've got a certain rugby player who perhaps is the greatest of all time that we've ever produced. But really, when it comes to volume and the huge amount of competitors, it comes down to football against GEA from my non-Dublin opinion, of course. So I put out a Twitter poll last night to see who would be the number one pick if you had to pick just a footballer. And I'm kind of surprised by the magnitude of the win, but not surprised by the identity of the winner, because Liam Brady, with about 1,000 votes, got well over half the vote. He got 53.5% of all votes for Liam Brady. Like, for me, I thought he was going to be a banker to be on the mountain anyway.
Really?
I just thought it would be much closer between himself and John Giles. Now, Giles did come second. Ronnie Whelan came third, by the way. And there was a couple of other options that you could have commented in to offer. And Liam Whelan was the one that actually came up quite a bit.
Right. I would have had Giles ahead of Brady, but then, like, how do you measure this? That's the problem, isn't it?
It's true. It also comes down to a metric that has come up a couple of times about, have we seen the player? What is our information about this player? And I think a lot of people who, basically more people who were around today will have remembered Liam Brady playing football. It's as simple as that. And I think that even if you were around to see both, you can probably still make a case that Liam Brady is the greatest footballer from the entirety of Dublin as a whole. Even just looking at his career path, the sort of player that Ireland haven't necessarily been prone to producing down through the years, the artistry of an Irishman isn't something that's always been shown on the English football stage. But to go to Arsenal, to shine for years, and then to go on to Italy and shine there for another few years, it's remarkable, really. And the complication, unfortunately, of his latter years as an Ireland player, not really part of the glory years of the Jack Charlton era, really kind of complicates the story around Brady a little bit. But I think as a quality footballer and one of our greatest exports, he has to be right up there.
Yeah, no, absolutely right up there. And we're nitpicking here, obviously, because that's the whole point of this, and that's where it gets very difficult. But so he wins 2 Serie A titles and an FA Cup. They're his individual honours. Giles wins 2 league titles, a second division, an FA Cup, a League Cup, the Fairs Cup, which becomes the UEFA Cup twice, and is a runner-up in a European Cup final. If Bayern Munich hadn't bribed the referee in '75, I think Giles' European Cup title would be the type of thing that would trump everything. It feels to me like Giles is just a tiny bit ahead of Brady. And maybe that's because I've spoken to him a lot over the last 20 years, and I've listened to those stories about Matt Busby and coming through that Matt Busby team and surviving the rejection of that. I don't know, but this is hard.
It's not easy whatsoever. My hunch is that they should both be on the mountain from North Dublin anyway. The real tricky thing. By the way, for anybody who doesn't know how we're going to work it, we're doing North Dublin today, South Dublin tomorrow, and then the overall county on Thursday. It's the overall county on Thursday, which is where I suspect this debate is really going to come to fruition, because I think they're both going to make today's mountain.
Are they? I don't know. I mean, I think we should probably fess up and say that there's been a bit of a mistake made in that we haven't actually, at the end of our pieces today, got North Dublin Mountain, do we?
No, we don't. I love the way you asked the question so that I'm the person here who actually fesses up. Straight up, we don't. We did a GEA piece. We did a football piece. There was a little bit of blowback on the idea that North Dublin should be its own mountain, and I guess the carpet has been pulled from beneath us. If we wanted to have a North Dublin mountain today, it's been pulled from beneath us, unfortunately. But we'll give you a flavour.
Yeah, and so we have a slightly longer list for you, as opposed to getting down to what the North Dublin...
You're a North Dublin resident.
So are you.
You can make the call. So you've been there for a lot longer than I have. You can make the call. I'll be happy enough for you to make the call.
Okay, so what was the... Oh yeah, okay, so Cluxton, O'Driscoll, Brady, Giles. That's the 4.
See, I'm in agreement with that. I think that if you were going to make a case for Kevin Heffernan, I probably would have come back with something along the lines of Cluxton, to be quite honest, as much of an icon as Heffernan is, and will go down as more of a cult figure, perhaps, in Dublin GEA. Does Dublin GEA have the profile and the I guess the narrative around the famine before 2011 without somebody like Kevin Heffernan. Of course they don't. He is such an important figure in the history, but he's also very, very important in the fabric of North Dublin. If we wanted to really start nitpicking here, where, you know, North Dublin is its own entity, like Stephen Cluxton is as synonymous with the blue of Dublin as anything else, whereas Kevin Heffernan, it's a club thing as well as his county thing. And for the people around Marino of St. Vincent's, I'd imagine Kevin Heffernan is as big a hero as you can possibly have. So for me, I think his candidacy is very, very strong. But then you've got one of the best footballers to ever play the game, somebody who's won 5 in a row. Nobody can really touch that. And in my opinion, I think you should be putting everybody from North Dublin who's been part of the 5 in a row into the mix there. Brian Fenton should be thrown into the mix. Jack McCaffrey should be thrown into the mix. James McCarthy should be thrown into the mix. Kieran Kilkenny should be thrown into the mix.
Is Castleknock, is it technically north or south? I can't tell. It's probably, they're west. See, we should have done a West Dublin as well. That could have carved everybody out there. It would have made it a little bit easier on ourselves. But that's essentially where we should be going with the conversation anyway. Right, fair point. But I think that they would be my 4 from North Dublin, and I would, you know, I'd be happy enough to have that argument with anybody, to be honest, at this stage.
You're not going to get a strong argument for me on those. Like, I think Brady is a banker for me. I think he probably does beat Giles to the mountain, in my view. I know the statistics he listed off there are very, very impressive, but I think Brady is probably
Who do you support?
number 1. When I'm thinking about this, I'm thinking about people who've succeeded in the sport that is played by more people around the world than anybody else. And I think Liam Brady's international achievements, like going to Italy,
Chelsea has more medals.
Like I know he does, but like, I mean, medals isn't everything that.
If you're going to Juventus, bear in mind that, you know, you get like a half a credit for winning a league there because they always win the league. That's like essentially, you know, it's much easier to win a league title at Juve than it is to win a league title at Leeds. Like think about Leeds coming from the second division all the way up on the back of Jazzy's shoulders, carrying them single-handedly. Up the mountain.
Ken Doherty is a Northsider.
No, he's not. He's from Ranelagh.
He's from Ranelagh. Sorry, my bad.
You're such a coachy.
This is I don't know. This is why you're going to be making the final decision, not me. When I put out that tweet last night, there was also a couple of mentions for Wes Hoolahan, and I'm not saying for 1 second that he'd be in with a shout here, but I think that kind of speaks to what we appreciate when we think of memorable footballers in this country. And I think Liam Brady was at the very top of the artists we produced in Irish football down through the years, the very best of the artists we produced. Like John Giles, Roy Keane are of more of the Irish school. Liam Brady is far more of a rarity, something that we won't see for a long time again. And when we do see a player like Liam Brady again, it is a rarity. And for me, that takes them to a whole new level. Like, I mean, you talk about Juventus walking the league. They walk the league because they have the pick of the best players, not just in their country, but also around the entire continent. And someone there said, let's have a bit of Liam Brady. Like, to even be a consistent player in Serie A for that amount of time, let alone the quality of the team you're playing with, I think is a strong case to be made for you. And I think the vote last night alone shows it, like over half the vote. And
look, they're both going to be. I'm going to be making sure that they're both going forward to the conversation on Thursday from DNS.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, you mentioned O'Driscoll, he obviously has to be there. There's no way you can make a case against him. And then you have to have one of the footballers, the Gaelic footballers. And it's hard to make a case against Cluxton. So all of a sudden, the North Dublin Mount Rushmore is in it picks itself territory. There is maybe...
it's Hefo or Cluxton. That's the... It comes down to that.
I just don't think, like, as much as I tried to wax lyrical there about Kevin Heffernan, I think when push comes to shove, you cannot leave Stephen Cluxton off the North Dublin mountain.
Well, he probably would, is the only thing. So, look, I want to move on because we'll come back to this a little bit later on. We've got plenty to get through as well. It's 10 minutes past 9 here, 10 minutes past 8. Sorry if you're choking on your cornflakes going, what? It's 10 minutes past 8 this morning here on OTB AM. Shane Hannon is with us. Shane, good morning to you. How are you?
Not too bad, lads. Keeping well, thanks. Yourselves?
Big day today in your world, isn't it? Is today an important anniversary?
For the moon landings?
Yes.
Yes, indeed, yeah. Well, it was actually yesterday.
Oh, right.
So it was good that Eoin Sheahan brought it up because yesterday was 50 years to the day since Neil and Buzz landed on the moon. Although you are technically right, Ger, because it was, I think, early hours of the 21st of July in Ireland when they actually took the first steps. So yeah, it's a special day in Irish terms. 50 years. 51 years.
We squeaked in there, and this is just another way of reminding everybody that Eoin zombified Neil Armstrong yesterday.
At least he didn't call him Louis Armstrong.
Anybody, you're gonna pick him, right?
The best and brightest.
A lot of people do get it worse. Like, a lot of people would call him Lance Armstrong and Louis Armstrong, or Buzz Lightyear for Buzz Aldrin. So, it could have been a lot worse, Eoin, to be fair.
No, it really couldn't. I mean, the guy's dead.
You're wearing green.
Of course. Have to wear green today. I only wish I had one of the retro ones, one of those Italian 90 jerseys, the I think it's Opel sponsored. So I'm going to have to dig one of those out maybe. I still have the hat here, of course, the Jack Charlton Champion Milk Monaghan hat. So at least we have a few bits of green in the office today.
You like your hats?
Oh yeah. Like, you can't get a better hat than that, Ger. Look at that.
Is the Forrest Gump hat not almost as good?
Close. It's close. Although Owen Sheahan did mistake it for a MAGA hat briefly, but it is most certainly like a Forrest Gump hat.
It's a very, very MAGA hat.
What's happening, Shane?
Yeah, we'll have to start with that the funeral that takes place this afternoon. So the FAI, of course, asking Republic of Ireland fans to wear green today, as the funeral takes place in Newcastle for the nation's most successful manager, Jack Charlton. Jack passed away, of course, last Friday week. At the age of 85, the cortege will pass through his home of Ashington in Northumberland. Almost 20,000 fans have signed the FAI's virtual book of condolences, and the association are in talks with Jack's family over a fitting memorial and tribute once coronavirus restrictions are lifted. Irish radio stations, as you've mentioned already, Ger, are being encouraged to play Put 'Em Under Pressure at 12:30 today. As a mark of respect, we'll be doing just that on the new OTB Sports app later. Meanwhile, An Post and Britain's Royal Mail are to collaborate on the release of new postmarks for the first time, commemorating the life of Jack Charlton. For the next 3 weeks, all stamped mail posted in Ireland and England will be marked with a football and the words Jack Charlton 1935 to 2020. Meanwhile, the Irish Independent report that League of Ireland Premier Division clubs have written to the FAI to ask them to send the proposal for an All-Ireland League to UEFA, so that the European governing body can ratify it. If UEFA signed off on that proposal, it would still require support from the Irish Football Association north of the border. Wolves' no win over Chelsea on Sunday will secure European football for a second season for them. Nuno Espirito Santo's side occupies 6th in the Premier League table this morning, following their 2-0 win over Crystal Palace yesterday. Matt Doherty with a nice assist in that game as well. Wolves have already surpassed their points total from last year. Their manager admits he's impressed with the improvements his players continue to make.
So many times I repeat the same words and say improving and building and looking for the next challenge. And I think we embrace it in the beginning and we clearly improve. So one game to go, we have already overcome the points of last season. So the improvement is there.
Elsewhere, Sheffield United's European ambitions bit the dust with a 1-0 defeat at home to Everton yesterday. And Brighton manager Graham Potter says he's pleased with his side's approach since the restart. A scoreless draw with Newcastle ensured their Premier League survival. Watford have their first game since the sacking of Nigel Pearson this evening. Should they beat Manchester City at Vicarage Road, they will all but secure their safety. Kick-off on that one is at 6 p.m. Aston Villa start tonight 3 points adrift of Watford and of survival, and they welcome FA Cup finalists Arsenal to Villa Park. It's an 8:15 p.m. start in that game. Man City boss Pep Guardiola has had a pop at Arsenal's hierarchy ahead of the last 2 matches, in which he says his players will be giving their all.
So Watford can beat us, Norwich can beat us, that happened in the first game, but beat us being who we are. So I said after the press conference against Arsenal, only regret that game we didn't play the first half and we played the second. We want to try to play 90 minutes like the second. And after we are beaten, shake hands. So the opponents always deserve my respect and credit, and Arsenal, they have it. I have all respect what Arsenal is on the pitch, not much off the pitch, but on the pitch a lot.
Some rugby news as well this morning. The Irish provinces remain coronavirus free after the latest round of testing. A second batch of tests were conducted at Connacht and Ulster last week, all of which returned negative. In total, there have been 407 tests conducted so far and not a single positive result, which is very good news. And finally for me this morning, lads, a rare LeBron James trading card has sold for a record-breaking $1.8 million at an auction. Saturday's sale at Golden Auctions nearly doubled the previous record for a modern-day card of $923,000 set in May. That was for a card of Los Angeles Angels star Mike Trout. Upper Deck produced only 23 copies of this particular LeBron James card, which was signed by James during his 2003-04 rookie season with the Cleveland Cavaliers. So if you have $1.8 million lying around, you could have got yourself that LeBron James trading card.
I just don't understand the whole value of the trading cards and the memorabilia stuff. I mean...
It was in mint condition, though, apparently. It was given 9.5 out of 10 ratings, so it must be a decent card.
Darts and sports memorabilia worth millions. I don't understand either of them. It's just a thing. I've got this giant mental black spot when it comes to these things. Pep Guardiola throwing a little bit of shade to the direction of your boys. What's this all about, Eoin? Is it about your little snippy letter that you bound together with a bunch of other people and wrote to the Court of Arbitration for Sport saying, kick them out, sling their hook, screw them? Was that what it was?
Arsenal were like teacher, 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 and personally I've got no issue with that whatsoever. I mean, if there's a student doing wrong, tell the teacher and make sure that student receives a sufficient punishment. So good on Arsenal is what I say. And this is just another week of parading around from Pep Guardiola. Peacocking, I think, is the official term for how Pep Guardiola has behaved in the aftermath of the CAS case last week, where, Manchester City weren't exactly found innocent on all charges. So I don't know. It's just been a strange week to be listening to Pep Guardiola. Where this sort of sense of arrogance is coming from, I'm not quite sure.
The peacocking around, you'd think that might have been some inspiration for them to actually try and win that FA Cup semi-final. But anyway, what's Shane's Mount Rushmore of astronauts? Good question.
Great question.
Oh, that's a tough question. Top of the list is Gene Cernan, the guy behind me there, the last man to walk on the moon, Apollo 17. Oh, there's too many to choose from. John Glenn, the oldest man in space.
You just said there's too many to choose from without it being ironic. It was like...
Yeah, that was unintended. But you can tell that person, look, 12 Americans walked on the moon, so it's hard to distinguish.
Come on, that's the whole point. Come on.
As long as Ken Doherty makes this Dublin one, but I don't hold my breath because Dennis Taylor did not make Tyrone and Alex Higgins did not make Antrim. So clearly snooker is dead, according to our selectors.
Dennis Taylor should have made Tyrone.
Oh, 100%.
I was away for that. Were you here for that, Eoin?
Yes.
What were you doing? You have to intervene.
I was allowing people to make their own choices. It's not up to us to decide.
Yeah, it is. You're supposed to intervene. You're supposed to help people out because they don't realise it's going to be a scar in their lives forever.
That's just your opinion, man. It's how I put that to anybody who says that. Where does Matt Damon and The Martian come in your astronauts Mount Rushmore? It's
a decent film, a bit highfalutin, as my dad would say, in terms of scientific accuracy, but it's a good film. Interstellar, I'm more of an Interstellar man. Matt Damon, of course, in that as well, but what's he not in?
Very good. Okay, so you didn't give us a Mount Rushmore there. You filibustered until you got distracted and decided, no, we don't have to.
You can't choose between... It's like choosing between your favourite children, Jerry. It can't be done. I mean, astronauts are
Whichever one isn't crying. That's the answer.
Yeah, well, fair.
Whichever one isn't currently crying, that's my favourite. That 1 second, and I anybody who is a parent will fully agree with me. 18 minutes past 8 here this morning, Shane. Good stuff. Thanks very much for that. OTB AM is live in association with Gillette. We don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters. Jackie White on YouTube says Ronnie Whelan, longevity, medals, leadership, consistent top-tier club and country delivery, a footballer with it all, defensive and offensive.
Yeah. And we've got Denny Ryan on Twitter giving me abuse. GIlroy, rock of sense today. Giles better than Brady, not even a debate. And yes, the ref was bribed in 75. Eoin Sheahan go back to bed. Giles was chavvy-like in his pomp. Are you drunk already? He tweeted me directly. So you've got your opinion is definitely being supported there a little bit. Like, they both need to be there. I hate to cop out. We've probably created a debate there that doesn't need to happen for this mountain.
Well, it probably does need to happen for the final.
For the final, yeah. Unless Paul McGrath comes in and, I don't know, snatches the hearts and minds of our judges to go ahead of Brady and Giles, potentially, given how beloved he is by literally everybody in Ireland. So that could be the complication for Thursday, for sure. But, yeah, if any Irish player was chavvy-like, I think he always has to be in contention for their counties. Mount Rushmore, no question about that. And Denny Ryan there is a big Leeds fan, so I'll bow to his knowledge. I'll bow to kind of your sense of this as well, a little bit. But also, over half my straw poll are thinking Liam Brady here, but maybe that's an age thing.
And there was another one there. No need to split Dublin in 4, north, south, east and west. And Enda's just deleted it on me happily enough there. West was Eamon Coughlin. East was Brian O'Driscoll. I can't remember who north and south were. South was Harrington. So North would have been maybe Giles or Brady. So, but that would make sense. North South one. So you doing this geographically?
Yeah, it's just struck me that we should have done this sport by sport for the whole county, because once you start dividing things into 4, it gets a little bit complicated. So we shouldn't have done this by geography. We should have done a football Mount Rushmore, a GA Mount Rushmore, and other sports Mount Rushmore potentially. But too late for that. It is like way too late for that.
Well, I mean, it's not. We could still change it. I know Tommy is pulling his hair out just listening to you on his day off. Going, what? 21 minutes past 8 here on OTB AM this morning. If you want to get in touch with us, 0879 180 180 is the number. And a reminder, OTB AM is live in association with Gillette. We don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters. A reminder, we've got a very special show coming your way soon. Our brand new series, Andy Lee Meets, on OTB, which is in association with the all-new Say It Leon, the brand's first fully connected car. We're going to play a clip of that a little bit later on. But in the meantime, I'm delighted to say Graham Hunter is here with us this morning. Graham, good morning to you.
Hey there.
Let's start with the trolling bits and the electoral politics, where apparently becoming like Manchester United is one of the worst things that could possibly happen to a club of Barcelona's stature. Are Barcelona becoming the new Manchester United?
Whoa, that's a very philosophical question for this time in the morning. Who's throwing that mud at them?
One of the presidential candidates, he said we're in danger of becoming the new Milan or the new Manchester United.
Okay, that's a couple of days ago. You're right. It was said. Look, I think what's happening at the moment is that the cultural angst is so great that even before they lost the title, which was last Thursday, there were many around the Camp Nou, and we've spoken about this on your show a couple of times, who are beginning to fear for the future, not just the present. I think the point is, number one, there's been a decline. And when rust sets in, sometimes it isn't as simple as it now retrospectively seems in either 2002 or in 2007-8, when the previous reign was the Gaspar presidential reign was ended by a landslide Joan Laporta victory, and things kind of went right within 6 months, or when 2007-8 Rijkaard's last season was ended by the arrival of Pep Guardiola and they won a treble, things like that. And I hope we said that one off the ball. If they're not impossible to repeat, they're so ultra rare that we'll be back to the situation where when rust takes a grip, and it has at the La Masia and at Camp Nou and in the boardroom and in their accountancy practices, then it's not easy to fix. So the hard truth is that right now Barcelona look exhausted. They're not playing particularly good football. The fact that they took the league title race to the penultimate day is down to the hard will and the brutal talent of a group of players like Messi, Alba, Suarez, Piqué, for example, Busquets, Ter Stegen. There needs to be a training upgrade. They're not shirking, but they're not at that intensity level every day that makes them elite. They're good enough to cling on to being narrowly knocked out of the cup. They're still in the Champions League with a 1-1 tie score against Napoli at the moment. But you don't need binoculars or a telescope to look at the middle future and say, well, with Dembele constantly injured, and there's a massive debt on that, with Coutinho unlikely to be welcomed back and a massive debt on that, with Griezmann at the moment not having scored enough to never mind just justify the 120 odd million that it cost to buy him. But it's very clear that until late in the season, they hadn't found a way to fit him in with Suarez and Messi. They did find that. It looked spectacular, and Griezmann immediately got a minor injury. So the problems are vast in terms of, they're not vast in terms of what Charlton are suffering right now, or Wigan are suffering, but Barcelona expect to be a winning machine. They expect the culture and the La Masia philosophy to blossom and continue, and all of that is under threat. It's a legitimate comment. The Manchester United part, I'm not signing off on.
Fair enough. I mean, well, as in Manchester United.
Milan is a good point. Milan is a better point. Milan was a behemoth that you thought could never be tipped. And they've gone through something that Manchester United definitely haven't suffered. During the time when we've been legitimately criticising Manchester United for their choice of, well, who runs them, how they spend the money, their transfer policy, their coaches and how they're dealt with, what kind of football they put on, they've still consistently won trophies. or being close to winning trophies. They now, legitimately, despite the FA Cup result, they now can point to several, and I mean several, key footballers who have either been developed at Old Trafford and Carrington or who have come through the ranks there. So I would say if you leave Barcelona out of it and you were to compare AC Milan and Manchester United, then it's an unfair comparison. It's not the right model to use at all.
Fair enough.
It's also true that Barcelona aren't coming off a 26-year reign, as, for example, Milan did with, say, Berlusconi, for example. So the Milan one is a clearer comparison. It makes sense because you must remember the time when, both in European and domestic terms, it looked like AC Milan could never be robbed of a feeling of dominance for more than about 8 or 9 months, and now they've been pitiful for a long time, and that's what I think. I guess it was Victor Font, the presidential candidate for next summer, who made that remark, and I think there was legitimacy in it.
Is there anybody around Barcelona who is thinking that the new era will be a Messi-less era, and it would be better for the club to be the ones who are agitating on that front rather than Messi, as in reject him before he rejects us and try and manage that and try and cash in some way? I don't even know if they could cash in, or if the contract is such a way that maybe this summer you let it toll and then all of a sudden you go, okay, right, look, we had this offer here, what do you think? Why don't we all just do this now? Is there anybody in the club who thinks that the right thing to do is to strike first when it comes to that?
There was, Chair. There was. And one of them ended up in preventative prison for a year and a bit, Sandro Rosset. The other one is Bartomeu, who's a hugely unpopular president now. He was vice president before. When those two were a duo of whom I despair in just about everything that I believe in as somebody who chronicles football in Spain, I really found huge amounts to oppose about Rosset and Bartomeu as president and vice president. They began to tout that idea several years ago when they were taking a poll on various issues across the club of what are called the socios, the members. And remember, whenever Barcelona are going really well or Real Madrid are going really well, people in the UK and Ireland often asked about membership, clubs being owned by members. And the system is always eulogized. At times like this, there's less attention on the fact that often members can be lulled into a false sense of security. They can, just like all voters, they can make bad decisions. And even though it's a membership club at Real Madrid, Florentino Perez's power has been almost unbroken for 20 years. I say almost because he walked away, came back, won elections again. And therefore, the lateral thinking that you've posed there, Ger, was something that Rosset and Bartomeu started to wonder about 4 or 5 years ago. And in a long, long questionnaire, they slipped out, would you think it was disastrous if the club sold Messi, in it sort of question number 36 of 50. And there was uproar about it because at that stage, they were beginning to resent the fact that Messi and his people were in such a powerful negotiating position every time that they came to renew the contract. They felt, and I think you were hinting at this, they felt a little bit locked in, a bit Harry Houdini'd about how do we get rid of this straitjacket of needing Messi on the pitch, recognising that he's our best player now and probably of all time, but can we afford to keep paying him that much money? Do we want to show who's boss? And they flirted with that, and they were slapped down by the media, by the membership. There was a little bit of bad feeling between Messi and one of the vice presidents who was in charge of economics, who said, do we really have to keep renewing this guy's contract every... Well, yes, if you want to keep the best player in the world. He just, even in a poor season for Barcelona and an indifferent season for Messi, in my view, he's won the Pichichi, he's the top scorer. His assists and goals across the season in all competitions would be up around the 60 mark. That's a hell of a lot of goals. He's definitely been Barcelona's best player. He's kept them in things. When he clicks, they all click. The Villarreal victory was like rolling back the years by about 5 or 6 when they beat Villarreal at the Madrigal 4-1. And Messi's still the heart of everything. Having just turned 33, the question is, he may wish to leave. There are multifold opinions about whether it's a bluff, whether he is really weighing up his opportunities of going somewhere else. Would he go to Manchester City, Paris Saint-Germain? Would he go back to Newell's Old Boys? Not only I think does nobody know, I don't think a decision's been taken. Messi is assessing what's going on, assessing whether there'll be good business done in the summer, and whether Kiki Setien will stay on. Kiki Setien has proved, I would go so far as to say, inept in how to manage a squad like this. His football principles are really good. When his Las Palmas or Real Betis teams were playing well, they were a joy to watch. Managing footballers like that, who kind of where the power seat is changed between the coach has it and the players don't. And here it's like, you know, you're not even allowed to sit down in the presence of this squad, never mind using the power seat. He's just not good enough. So how do you find a coach to take over for what looks like being a year? Because in a year there are guaranteed elections. It's not guaranteed, but it looks extremely likely that this candidate, Victor Font, will win. He wants Xavi to come in. Xavi recently renewed his deal with Al Sadd in Qatar for a couple of years, but with a break clause in a year's time if Barcelona come in for him. So he's obviously thinking, yeah, in a year's time I might be ready. I might choose to go. Whether he, as you pointed out with your lateral thinking, wants to inherit a 34-year-old Messi is another question altogether, and far too complicated for this time in the morning, particularly a year. So Jared, if that's your follow-up.
Fair enough. We can come back to that next year.
On Messi's comments, Graham, he described the team as weak, inconsistent and lacking in desire. And it's interesting how we immediately go to Sheahan and what is Sheahan thinking and will he leave the club this summer? What are his teammates thinking after hearing that?
They know the truth, Eoin. They know the truth. They know that he's talking about the performance. There are one or two players that I don't think he gives a fig for, really. He knows absolutely clearly that there aren't enough high-quality players or high-quality athletes around him. He has taken time to warm to Griezmann, but that process has definitely begun to gel thanks to Luis Suarez. He pointed his finger really strongly at the management of the team and the management of the club. He said there needs to be global self-criticism, global meaning a word that suggests everybody at the club needs to look at their performance. And if you're asking, can Messi drive players against him? Is there a schism in the squad? Is there a lack of unity because he's been critical? No, all of them know that he is in charge. With due deference to my neighbours, he's top dog. He's not a yapper. His bite, I think, is something that they're all deadly afraid of. They all know that he's their best footballer, remains their best footballer, and probably could remain Barcelona's best footballer for another 2 or 3 years at least. Athletically, he's still in great nick, and he deserves to have a team built around him. And what's happened is that, you know, there was a pretty strange circumstances on, but like in the last game, they went up to the Basque Country to play Alaves with 5 subs, only 5 subs, 2 of whom were goalkeepers. And after that, those critical words, I've been maladroit. The best way to answer you is to say he stood on the pitch after losing at home to Osasuna, who for sort of 11 minutes of normal time and 4 or 5 minutes of added time had 10 men. They lost at home to Osasuna. He said those things. They were coruscating, you're right. Look what happened at the weekend. They went out there against an Alaves side who should have been able to give them difficulties, to hurt them. It should have been a Barcelona side lacking in motivation. And they literally had about, in senior terms, they probably had about 13 or 14 fit players. And they won 5-0. And they won 5-0 at a canter. It could have been 7 or 8. And they played, again, they rolled back the years. Messi's point is, where are these performances when they really count? And he's right. And you can unpick it, you can answer it in that the squad building, the squad refreshing has been inept.
It's the 8th of August, I think, is the second leg of the game against Napoli.
That's right.
What kind of schedule do they have between now to make sure that there's match fitness and that actually they can have a squad that's capable of playing? Will they have more than 5 on their bench that night, for example?
Well, first of all, they're going to have a change of personnel, and Arthur will be at Juventus by then. Pjanic won't be registered. Braithwaite isn't registered to play in that competition. Ousmane Dembele might be fit, should be fit. Griezmann will be fit. There were suspensions up at Alaves, so automatically, so long as there are no training incidents, Piqué comes back, Alba comes back. It's odd to say it, given that they They looked as if they needed a burst of athleticism in the last few weeks of the season. The first thing they need is a holiday and a rest. To play 11 games in the way that they have in just over a month is ultra demanding, and they will be given a break. And it's the right thing to do. It'll be very, very brief. Then it'll be about conditioning, and then it'll be about whether they can introduce intensity into training. But the absolute key about whether they can beat Napoli or not, and those who watched the first leg will understand that Barcelona were a little lucky to come away with a 1-1 draw. And Rino Gattuso's side is full of exactly what Barcelona hate. It's what was Superman afraid of? Kryptonite. There are 6 or 7 kryptonite players in that Napoli side who run hard at you, who put the ball beyond you, make you turn, make you chase, who aerially are dominant over Football Club Barcelona. It should not be taken as a given that Barcelona, with no crowd at Camp Nou, go through. They can go through, man for man, in terms of skill. They're the better side. And the answer to your question is yes, there'll be a distinctly different level of personnel potentially available to City. And the likelihood is that he stays because the turnaround time is so short. Personally, I think that's an error. I think that the breach between him and the squad is between him and 6 or 7 of the hardliners in the squad is so significant that probably promoting the B team coach Garcia Pimento is the right thing to do temporarily. So when you tune in to watch Barcelona-Napoli on the 8th, which comes the night after the return leg between Real Madrid and Manchester City, don't forget, right now, City are 2-1 up on Madrid and won that first leg pretty handsomely. And if you look at the way Madrid have been performing, what City have been doing in terms of slightly Jekyll and Hyde, right now, you could argue that the slightly better chance is that Madrid pull off the win and go through, whereas Barcelona might trip up to Napoli. No guarantees, and Barcelona are capable on the day of putting 2 or 3 past Napoli. But it's no longer easy to say, oh, yeah, this is their day. Not easy at all.
Let's talk about Madrid then, because it's been a remarkable return to, I don't know what the word is here, I'm going to use the word normalcy, Graham, because it seems surprising almost that the spine of this team, the old guard of Real Madrid, have been the ones who have stepped up under Zidane for especially the second half of this season. There are so many questions to ask here. The one I wanted, though, is about Gareth Bale. How long is he going to stay at the club? He's obviously been in weird form, to say the least, and I mean in terms of his mood over the last little while as Real Madrid have kind of trotted to the Liga title. Where does he end up at the end of all of this? Because Zidane has been a pretty good manager down through the years.
In my mind, I was ready to say to you, I don't care. The management of an asset of Bale's worth by Real Madrid hasn't looked particularly good, but he fits into a category, and it's a horrible trait that football's shown over all of our careers. When they don't want a player, when they want him to leave, very often footballers can tell you, and maybe on off the ball, you've had those stories. And maybe it's the same in some parts of GAA, I don't know. But in soccer, we all know that if you refuse to leave, once the Bosman rule stopped clubs treating you in exactly the way they wanted at the end of your contract, the gloves came off and clubs became something very close to bullies to players that they wanted to show the door to. Bale's been in that situation for some seasons, and the balance of power is tilted. There were seasons when Madrid said, go and talk to Manchester United, and he did. He spoke to Mourinho about going to Manchester United in those days. And that was the season when Mourinho in the summer tour greeted him with, I can't sign you because you don't come out and speak out about wanting to leave Madrid. And he opted to stay because, with the exception of his individual relationship with Zidane, which is no worse than cool, and with the exception of him not playing, life for Gareth Bale in Madrid is pretty good. There's another trophy, there are bonuses, there's golf, the weather's fantastic. He's still got some respect from, a good handful of his teammates. At 31, he's still a very good athlete. And my answer to your question is that there is a bit of a Gordian knot in that Madrid have long wanted to get him out, to cut his wages, to reuse the money that they could get for him, not what they spent on him, in order to clear some of their debt or to spend it on other players. But the places that Gareth Bale is willing to go to, his agent asked to be allowed to go free to China. this is where I begin to lose support for a very good footballer who initially was underrated in what he was achieving in Spain and deserved far more credit, but who, between him and his agent, the way in which they've confronted a problem, which is quite typical in football, has been kind of like a little bit recalcitrant teenagers. Well, Mom, Dad, I'm going to sit you out here. I'm going to sit in the corner, I'm going to sulk. I don't like that. I don't respect that. And I'm far more pointing the finger at Jonathan Barnett than at Gareth Bale. This problem could and should have been resolved with each side giving a little bit, ceding a little bit is what I mean. And then the world would, because, we're talking about Bale on this show, not because we're Welsh, not because we desire the national team to do well, not because we're Madridistas, but because Gareth Bale remains an intriguing, exciting, international class footballer. And right now we're seeing, some of his golden years dribbling away. And none of us as neutrals who are desperate to see the elite footballers do special things, none of us want to see that. And it bugs me that Madrid are being singled out here alone as the odd ones in this partnership, because that's not true.
Yeah, no, it's true. The career will be over in the blink of an eye, and we'll all be looking back on, geez, he was amazing. Look at what he did. Look at that highlights reel. Real pity he never put together a full couple of seasons that we could all watch and enjoy. Graham, great stuff. Thanks very much. Graham with us there this morning. 0879 180 180 is the number if you want to get in touch with us on WhatsApp. Right, a very special show coming your way soon. Andy Lee Meets on OTB, which is in association with the all-new Seat Leon, the brand's first fully connected car. In the first episode, Andy sits down with Mickey Rourke, the actor from The Wrestler. Here's a sneak peek of what's to come.
Listen, you ain't been where I've been. You haven't walked in my shoes. There's no fucking way you're gonna win this. There's no fucking way. You'd have to kill me, wake me up, and kill me again. So when I do the acting, I do make it personal.
Time for the papers.
OTB AM.
It's 8:43 this morning. I'm going to tell you what's in the newspaper headlines. The Irish Times is essentially leading with last night's match reports, and then Kieran Kilkenny was out doing media yesterday for the cool camps. So he's been saying that he's delighted to be back playing games, and the door is always open for Jack McCaffrey. Pep Guardiola also says promoted Bielsa will be good for the Premier League. It's going to be very interesting to see exactly what type of season Leeds put together next year. I'll go through the English papers there, but it's all England beating the West Indies in the cricket yesterday. Except in The Guardian, I have a story about Nathan Aki signing for Pep for 35 million. Chelsea obviously sold him for 20 million. He is going to be available now apparently from Bournemouth for 35, and there's going to be a rush for his services at 35 million. It is deal or no deal, says the back page of the Star. And this is Jadon Sancho. Red Devils refused to overpay for Sancho at 85 million euros. And Watford may Puel in Claude. Claude Puel is the early favourite to take over as Watford's next head coach. He'd be the 13th managerial appointment in 8 years, and that depends on whether or not they actually end up staying up. And then Pep has his pop at Arsenal, which we played you the audio of a little bit earlier on. Pep shot at Gunners is that same story, and Kilkenny has 2020 vision, as in he wants the games to be played. Pep's gun blast is the headline on that one, and Wolverines is the headline on Wolves beating Crystal Palace 2-0. And De Gea's on the brink, so Neil Custis is reporting that David De Gea could be axed from Manchester United's crucial Champions League bid this week. That would be an interesting decision. The Daily Mail this morning says, up for grabs, plenty in mix for Irish number 2, Flannery. So this is Jerry Flannery, who's now part of the coaching ticket at Harlequins, where he's line-out coach. Says that there's a bunch of players who could be the new hooker. Ronan Kelleher of Leinster, Connacht rookie Dave Heffernan were all in Andy Farrell's Six Nations squad ahead of Sean Cronin and Niall Scannell, and he says them and Rob Herring are all in with a shout of taking over long-term from Rory Best. Henderson will return to United, but only as number 1, so a ballsy move from Dean Henderson. He's like, yeah, I'll come back, no problems, but you got to make me number 1, which, probably isn't the type of thing that you can do when you're at that age. You probably can't tell Ole Gunnar Solskjaer who to pick, and it'll be interesting to see how Solskjaer deals with that. Jack's move opens door, but McCaffrey always welcome to come back. So that's essentially, we have a big squad, we've loads of players, says Kieran Kilkenny, and it opens the door for somebody else to get in, which has always been their attitude. Mick, I'll go green for Jack. It's Mick McCarthy wearing green today. The Racing Post, Ballydoyle could saddle up to 6 against Enable in the King George. So just 2 trainers have entries for the King George this week, and Aidan O'Brien has 6 entrants. We'll talk about that on Friday Night Racing with Johnny Ward at 3 o'clock on all our social channels on Friday afternoon. And they also have Unhappy Hornets set to field City backlash. I don't know, I think Watford have a good chance of actually putting it up to Manchester City, who don't really seem to be putting it in at the moment. I respect Arsenal on the pitch, but not off it, claims Guardiola, and that's Pep speaking after in the press conference the other night. Jackman hails COVID-19 green light, but urges caution until games restart. And I will be wearing green to remember Big Jack, says McCarthy. And here is the final newspaper headline for us this morning is The Examiner. Kennedy wants crowd limit for games to be extended to 500. So Tracy Kennedy, the Cork County Board chairperson, is echoing John Horan's calls of saying that there should be 500, and John Fogarty has a column backing that up, essentially saying that big ground should have more people in them. So that's what's in the papers for you this morning. Owen, what have we got? What are we looking at?
We start with Jack Charlton's funeral. Kind of another look back on the last few days is what you're going to get on OTB Sports Radio this afternoon. The levels of tributes, like kind of initially when the story broke very sadly last week, I don't know, I was, you can't be surprised by the love that was shown for Jack Charlton, but the sheer volume of it was absolutely incredible. And kind of the spin-off of this has been a few interesting bits over the last couple of days. Sheahan has mentioned the stamp, the Jack Charlton stamp coming out of Ireland at the moment. And I'm sure you saw the Jack Charlton mural as well in Ballon over the last few days. They're looking to officially rename the bridge, the Jack Charlton Bridge as well. That's in Newcastle. And then over at Des Moines, there was questions from Liam McHale last week. They should do the same thing in Ballon to actually further solidify his legacy there. So the funeral is today, but kind of what a week it's been, and like I'd imagine for certain people it's kind of been a nostalgic week, thinking back and looking back at all the footage and all the audio from the time.
Yeah, it's been great. Like I think coming at the end of that period of uncertainty that we've all been through as well, and coming at the end of everybody having watched a fair bit of the football that had kind of triggered memories or triggered conversations or triggered history lessons in how did we get to where we are now. It was just a really interesting moment for everybody to kind of come together and go, actually, you know what, this one time in our history we were all incredibly unified, and it took a big gruff Englishman who was an icon in England, are part of their iconic team, probably not an icon when he got the job with us, but then ends up becoming an icon. And it's kind of it definitely makes you think about stuff that we don't appreciate until it's gone in a funny way, that actually we take a lot of stuff for granted. And I don't know, maybe the stuff that we've been through is going to make us a little bit more considerate when it comes to dealing with each other and our history and our international relations. But I don't know, maybe that's a futile hope. Who knows?
Yeah, I don't know. We'll move on to the Ballon d'Or. It's been called off, Ger, which I think, first of all, is a little bit of a shame. So it's been called off because of the fact that there is not going to be a fair enough season. Like, I mean, football is back. Football is being played. Like, I think that this thing could have been done online, but it's not going to happen. So we should just name the Ballon d'Or this morning. We should do our top 3 and just get it over and done with. Who would have actually won the Ballon d'Or? Of course, we can't predict what would happen between now and the ceremony, but who knows? We're probably still going to get this completely and totally correct. So the top 3, in my perspective, for the Ballon d'Or 2020 is as follows. In third place, it would have been Kevin De Bruyne for me. In second place, for me, it would have been Lionel Messi, despite the fact that he's had an indifferent season, as Graham Hunter has put it. Indifferent Lionel Messi is better than basically everything else that's ever existed, though. And in first place, it would have been Robert Lewandowski. Lewandowski would have got the gong this year. He would have got the Ballon d'Or and taken it home. There would have been a few honourable mentions for the likes of Karim Benzema and Cristiano Ronaldo. But for me, that would have been the 3. So actually,
Virgil?
now that I think about it, we didn't need to have the ceremony because that's what it would have been.
Where's Virgil?
Don't think Virgil van Dijk makes top 5, to be honest. Sadio Mane doesn't really either. Like, you're talking about individualism here. Liverpool was about a lot more than individualism. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if Kevin De Bruyne actually pips him to the post in the domestic awards, to be honest.
Where's Jordan Henderson?
Where is Jordan Henderson, indeed? This particular voting committee didn't recognise Jordan Henderson as much as some other committees clearly recognise Jordan Henderson. Jordan Henderson's not going to win any individual awards this year. He's had a fantastic season. He's been a vital cog in Liverpool's year, but he wouldn't be anywhere near the same company for me as someone like Kevin De Bruyne, who has just been out of this world since the restart. And I guess that actually does kind of strengthen things for the Ballon d'Or. It's all based on 2020, isn't it? So you're not really looking at it from the season as a whole. Although there has been a lot of weird kind of stat chasing from De Bruyne over the last couple of weeks, because he's trying to catch Thierry Henry's assist record in a single season in the Premier League. So he's been throwing his hands in the air. That's a joke, by the way. Whenever his teammates don't put the ball in the back of the net after he passes it in, he's not throwing his hands in the air, but he kind of threw the stink eye at, I think, Phil Foden a couple of weeks ago, when he didn't finish a gimme that he put on a plate for him. So if you're chasing stats, for me, it's never a good look. But like Lionel Messi, if we're talking about stats, has been outrageous. 25 goals, 22 assists in the Liga alone this season, and that's a disappointing year. But then Robert Lewandowski, 51 goals in 49 games in all competitions this season. It's a statistic that would have been inarguable for him to be the front runner, and he was the favourite. I think before all this, he would have taken home the Ballon d'Or.
So is the Ballon d'Or given out in December for that calendar year, or is it a season by season?
It is given out at the end of the year. The ceremony, it was December 2nd last year. So it's for the calendar year.
I didn't realise that. I didn't realise that it was a calendar year thing up until this. And I mean, the main issue here seems to be that it's obviously France Football Magazine are the ones who have traditionally handed out the Ballon d'Or, and who have invented and have always handed out the Ballon d'Or. But because there's no football in France, because they very early on made the decision, which, seems like a little bit of a knee-jerk now, given they could easily be playing football and have finished their season, that has ultimately meant that we're not going to get one. So because Neymar couldn't win it or Mbappe couldn't win it, nobody else can win it. It just seems it's a very French thing to do, right?
It's true. I've seen Neymar mentioned in this company as well. Like Paris Saint-Germain still alive in the Champions League. Maybe France Football Magazine will do a U-turn on this if Paris Saint-Germain go on and actually win the Champions League, and they'll be like, actually, Neymar, Ballon d'Or, Mbappe second place, you're back on Ballon d'Or. Who knows? It does actually seem like quite a French thing to do, but I don't fully understand it. I mean, it's very possible to do award ceremonies remotely. It's nothing to do with safety. They just clearly feel that they didn't have enough of an actual season to award this. But actually, the only actual season that hasn't really existed is you guys in France.
FIFA are going to be appointing their own Footballer of the Year at some point. So we'll wait and see. Somebody can still win that, whoever that's going to be. You're saying it's going to be Lewandowski.
Lewandowski, 100% best footballer in the world on form. If you're basing things on form, that's what it has to be. I think Cristiano Ronaldo's obviously had an amazing season if you're looking at pure goal scoring records, but it's been all goal scoring really. That's the only stat line you're looking at with Ronaldo. And I'm sure people out there will actually say that Ronaldo should be the winner this year. Like 30 goals in Serie A this season. His output has been incredible. But I just think Messi's been better than them all season, and then Kevin De Bruyne. Probably a little bit of Premier League bias, I will admit, on that front of Kevin De Bruyne, having just spent a lot of time watching him over the last few months. But he's the best passer in the world, the best Premier League player right now. And maybe that's probably the big argument to be had now is does an individual from Liverpool's incredible title win usurp Kevin De Bruyne as player of the season?
Is there not a little bit of De Bruyne that's where were you when the league's title was actually up for grabs, as opposed to when the league season's finished, you're absolutely amazing? Is there not a little bit of that, no pressure involved? What have you done for me lately in big games?
I think he was excellent during the entire year. I think it's more Kevin De Bruyne looking around at his dressing room thinking, what have you done for me why have you let me down, sort of thing, rather than Kevin De Bruyne letting the team down when things were going wrong. In fact, I think he did anything but let the team down. I think any criticism of Kevin De Bruyne this season has actually been totally misplaced. He's been consistently excellent, actually, and I think that some of the defensive frailties that have popped up have been a bit more costly to them than having someone like Kevin De Bruyne not on form, because he has been on form, and I just really can't see that there has been somebody who's been as good as him all season long. Like the only kind of people you'd probably look at are the likes of Virgil van Dijk and Sadio Mane, who managed to put in that level of performance every single week. Like in many ways, even you look at the top scorers in the Premier League right now, and you're looking at the likes of Jamie Vardy. Like in many ways, despite the fact that Vardy has been excellent for a number of seasons, there is a little bit more of a freak about that he has been at that level all year. With Kevin De Bruyne, his brilliance has become normalised. With Virgil van Dijk, it's become normalised that you expect world-class output from them every single week, whereas with Jamie Vardy, again, despite the fact that he's been good previously and excellent previously, this feels like it's contained in one season, his true excellence, I think. And maybe there's a little bit to be said about that with Lewandowski as well. Like, I mean, scoring 51 goals in a season is absurd, and he might not do that next year. He'll probably score early 40s or something, and it'll still be a brilliant year. But no, for me, yeah, De Bruyne would be the Premier League representative if you had to pick one.
All right, 0879 180 180 is the number here if you want to get involved by WhatsApp, or you can use the hashtag OTBAM. What else, Eoin?
Will we do the All-Ireland League?
So what's the story?
So you've had 10 Electricity League Premier Division clubs. They've written to the FAI and basically asking them to submit a proposal for an All-Ireland League to UEFA for consideration. So you've had support for this specific version of the All-Ireland League as well, coming from Northern Ireland as well. So last week you had 10 of the 12 Irish Premiership clubs sending a letter to the IFA, and they asked for the proposal to be forwarded to UEFA, the All-Ireland League proposal, that is. And this despite the fact that the IFA have said that they're really not up for this, that actually they've kind of gone against this in the past. And that last week was a fairly big development. So we are kind of edging towards this scenario where some version of an All-Ireland League is going to happen soon, or there will need to be efforts to try and consider it soon. It may not be the full everybody together league version as has been touted in the past, but it may be a situation where you've got two separate leagues and playoffs at the end of the season, which some people might think is a bit of a stepping stone towards a proper one island league.
So just to explain exactly how this proposal would work, the two leagues will essentially start their seasons as separate leagues, and then 2/3 of the way through the season, the top teams from both two leagues will enter into a playoff-style situation, or a final third of the season before you have playoffs, and that way you can keep the European places for the two leagues. That way it's kind of they're separate, but actually it's an all-Ireland league for a period of the year. It's a little bit pregnant, but it might just work.
And like keeping the European places from having two separate leagues is important. And that also, I guess, is a good way of allowing the naysayers of the All-Ireland League to kind of cling on to their independence a little bit, to give the impression that there are two very separate things, and you can have both, that you can have separate leagues and you can also come together for the conclusion of the season, which I guess is a way of appeasing that. And like, is it naive to think that is a stepping stone? Like, because that's certainly the first thing I thought when I saw that particular format. Like that, but maybe that is naive. Maybe the realistic sense is that you've only got one chance at this, and it better be the best version possible when you take that opportunity.
But I think that if you have one proper All-Ireland League where everybody starts and plays the same number of games against each other, close from the north and south, a bunch of clubs are going to end up in a second-tier competition, and that they're not going to vote for that. And a bunch of clubs or one of the two federations will end up giving up a number of European places, and it's very difficult to see that happening too. So essentially it's the old cliche about football associations being turkeys voting for Christmas, and traditionally they haven't been too keen on that. Now maybe there's a breakaway, and maybe there's a complete breakaway, and ultimately we do end up with an All-Ireland League which is just rubber stamped by the two independent football associations. So I think the politics of this are going to be interesting over the next while, but perhaps that kind of hybrid where everybody gets to keep a little bit of their own territory is not a bad conclusion and not a bad way to get through it. So
If you're part of a breakaway, do you have a format in your head that would be the best solution to what's going on north and south?
I guess if you're part of a breakaway, you're just saying that we're going to have a proper league season where we'll play everybody home and away twice. It's the easiest thing for everybody to understand, and it's the easiest thing for everybody to see a structural integrity to the competition. This way, some teams are going to have a slightly easier schedule than other teams. You're going to play that team who is rubbish at home and beat them 5-0. The other team who plays them away from home beats them 3-0. The goal difference still counts at the end of the year. How do we work that out? Is there a formula? And then suddenly it's mathematical and it's not on the pitch. So like ultimately you would want it to be just a proper league season where there's the same number of European places as the league actually deserves, as opposed to a special case for a peace dividend for Ireland. But look, you know, you can make these cases to UEFA for a couple of seasons, derogation, and see what happens. That's really it, though, right?
Yeah, I think so. It'll just be very interesting to see, like, where does the IFA play their hand here? Because, as mentioned, they have been against an all-Ireland league for some time, or at least there have been voices within the IFA who aren't for this. But as you say there, this hybrid version of the League of Ireland and the Irish League coming together for some sort of playoff format at the end of their season means that they would be able to cling to a good bit of autonomy, and that might be the key here. Now, you've got the vast majority of your clubs lobbying you and saying that this proposal should be submitted to UEFA. You've got to listen to the clubs, essentially, don't you? Like, if it was 50-50, you might have some cases saying, well, actually, there's enough of a case against the proposal here from going forward to UEFA. But there's a bit of a landslide victory here in terms of Irish Premiership clubs. I think, though, those clubs are not saying that they're fully signed up to this. They want to explore the possibility of being signed up to it. So it's talks about talks, which, you know, we've seen that ultimately they do lead places. It might take 20, 30, 40, 50 years before something happens, but talks about talks is better than no talks about anything. Right, we've got to move on because a reminder, of course, OTB AM is live in association with Gillette. We don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters. The next hour of the show is dedicated to the final stretch of Mount Rushmore's. This week it's Dublin. It's the end of the road for Mount Rushmore, and to get a sense of the incredible sporting history of Dublin, we decided to make the unilateral decision to split the county in two for the first 2 days, and then we'll rejoin them. So those people who are like, oh, you can't split it, you bottled it, it's like, well, there isn't actually going to be a North Dublin and a South Dublin one. We're just getting the long list down to a short list. And before everybody loses their minds, John Giles and Brian O'Driscoll are going to end up on the official Dublin one. Our desire was to find out from Kenny what the truth was about football when he was growing up. So Kenny Cunningham is next, and then Sean Potts, who's the biographer of Pádraig O'Shea and Desi Farrell, and a man steeped in Dublin GAA himself, is going to talk to us about the GAA side of things. He ends up picking his own mountain and refuses to divide the county as a point of political principle. But that's okay, the conversation's great anyway, and it's a real illustration of who should be the GAA representative, which is essentially what we were looking for as well. So that's going to be the second half. That's what you're going to hear after. Next up, it's Kenny Cunningham in conversation with Eoin. Have a look.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
The Saturday panel on Off the Ball.
There's a growing hostility towards cyclists. We're somehow seen as a nuisance, when in fact we're just people trying to get to work.
I've never ever gotten one bad word said to me about my sexuality, or from the opposition, or from, actually in one match I was nearly, the girl was marking me so tightly, I was like, I have a girlfriend.
I'm not the person I was 10 years ago, and that doesn't worry me. I know I can play good enough golf.
Don't miss the panel every Saturday afternoon, only on Off the Ball.
Missing this?
Salah takes the shot. Oh, Mo Salah with one of the goals of the season. Unbelievable.
Then get this, the all-new OTB Sports app. Off the Ball, Ireland's premier sports channel, now has a new home, featuring the biggest names in Irish and world sports. Podcasts, interviews, news, commentary, analysis, plus almost 20 years of sporting archives. All free and ready when you are, at home or on the go. The new OTB Sports app. Download it now from the App Store and Google Play.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters.
I'm not worried about it. I can stand over this. Cora Staunton, Lee McHale, Kevin Kilban and Kieran MacDonald.
OTB AM's Mount Rushmore.
Okay, so it is the week where we're doing the Mount Rushmore of County Dublin. Naturally, we've had to split it into two sections. We're getting stuck into North Dublin today, and Kenny Cunningham is here to help us out with the football contenders from the Northside. Kenny, you're very welcome. First of all, just to set the scene a little bit here, as a child growing up in North Dublin, was it basically GAA or football? They were your two options when it came to the sport you were going to play.
I don't think it was anyway saying I was going to play either of those two, to be honest with you, Eoin, either. But yeah, they're the ones I kind of played predominantly growing up. GA at school mostly because the club football scene just didn't work for me playing the GA and the football. So it was basically football the weekends and GA in school. So that's what I kind of persevered with, and I was lucky enough, obviously, to have a career in one of those fields.
Let's get stuck straight into some of the contenders here, because this is the better side of the city, right? When it comes to the bigger names, like, make your case for the north side here. Why is it the better side of the city when it comes to the footballing talent that's come out of this side of the Liffey?
I wouldn't necessarily say the bigger name. It's definitely the better part of the city. I'd have that conversation with you all day. But no, look, it's hard for me to make a strong argument Northside rules in terms of the football and talent that's come through the county, because I remember when I played, I was trying to think there off the top of my head the number of Northside players. There wasn't too many, because we'd have our five-a-side games. We'd have Northside, Southside, Dublin v the rest of Ireland, that type of thing. But it was always a bit of a struggle getting a five-a-side team from North Dublin. It was basically me and Mark Kinsler. They were the first two names on the list, and then we'd be struggling a bit, to be honest with you. We'd be heading into Wicklow and Kildare and all the kind of surrounding Louth. We had to grab Gary Kelly and Ian Hart as like North Dublin stroke Louth men. So no, it was the Southsiders who dominated it. Dunny, Robbie, of course, Duffers, Quinney, all of them boys. So no, I can't honestly say at the time any of the squads I was in, there was a huge quota of players in the squad, but it's quality, not quantity, as we know.
Without question. And when it comes to quality, you just have to turn the clock back a little bit for some of Ireland's greatest ever sports people, let alone footballers who've come from the north side of the city. If you had to pick one name on this Mount Rushmore that comes from North Dublin that was a footballer, who would be your number one pick?
I can't just look. You got to give me a little bit of leeway here on in terms of a few of the names. In terms of football players, I think you have to be very careful. For me, I can't have a conversation about who's the best player, a kind of left back or a centre forward. They're very much position specific for me. So now, like some of the great footballers from North Dublin, obviously not necessarily of my time. Immediately, I mean, Johnny Giles is there. Johnny was just basically a hop, skip and a jump north, so he was Ormond Key, I think, John. So we're claiming him like a street urchin. And then Liam Brady and Ronnie Whelan for me. They're the three that kind of stand out. And I think there's a good discussion to be had there because they all occupy that central area of the pitch. I'd throw in kind of Dave O'Leary, Frank Stapleton of that era as well in terms of real top quality. But I think those three players, I think they were actually voted in as the three most influential. I think there was some kind of award given some years ago, not too long ago. Maybe RT were behind it, and I think those three players are pretty much in the shake-up. And there's not much between them. You could easily argue a case for any three of those players, but of the three of them, actually, for me, Liam's probably the most interesting one. Because it's only when you actually look at his career path. I was aware of the fact that Liam obviously played for Arsenal and he spent some time in Italy, etc., going up. You're aware of it and you hear of it. But when you actually delve into it a little bit more depth and you listen to people who saw him play at the time, who played with him, you become far more impressed in terms of what he actually achieved during his career. To leave Arsenal when he did, and he would have been reasonably young when he left Arsenal, on 24, 25 years of age, 1979, I think it was, 80, and made the step to Italy, Italian football and Juventus. That was huge. Like, I don't think we appreciate it now because, you know, there's such an overlap of players the last 10, 15 years in terms of playing different countries and, you know, the natural flow of players going and playing the football globally. It's not so much a talking point now, but back then it was a huge step for me. And I think to myself, what a brave thing to do, because he could have very easily stayed in the comfort zone at Arsenal. He was a great player there, loved, respected, and played there for another 10 years. But he didn't. He took, to some extent, a harder option. You know, took the step to join Juventus. Different environment, obviously, language, kind of battle-hardened league, and a very experienced side as well. And had to kind of prove himself all over again and establish himself in that environment. And not only that, Eoin, he actually thrived. It wasn't as if he went over there, he was part of a good Juventus squad, played his fair share of the games. I mean, he was never present for that first 2 years, and there were two years when they won the league title back-to-back, and he was instrumental. Not that I saw every game. I've seen very little on, just little snippets here and there. But the more you read about him during that time and listen to people speak about him, the more you get an appreciation of really how good he was and the impact that he made in that team. And that was a team full. Rossi was still playing then. Paolo Rossi, Bettiga, people at this. Tardelli would have been playing. Trapattoni, of course, was his manager. I imagine that's where he forged his links with Trapattoni. But he actually drove that team forward, Liam. And there was some quotes there from Trapattoni, not just about Liam's skill set. We all know that is kind of left foot and, you know, beautifully balanced player, lovely ball playing kind of midfielder. But Trapattoni spoke about kind of his personality, kind of mental strength, which he had as well in terms of being a leading figure in that team. So for me, that's hugely impressive. And it's amazing, really, that he left there after 2 years. I'm not talking too much here, am I? But this is obviously,
keep going, please.
This is probably the reason why I'd lean a little bit towards Liam, because he only left there because of Michel Platini's arrival and the three foreigner rule. Because there's no way he should have left that club. He could have easily spent in a different time. He could have easily spent 5-10 years there and won untold trophies. But it was a little bit political. I think Platini was coming in. The deal had been done. And they just couldn't accommodate Liam with him in that central midfield area. Not necessarily that Platini was by far the better player. It's just the timing of Platini coming at that time. So Liam went out the door and played Sampdoria, bounced to Inter after that, didn't he? I think he finished, was it Ascoli or something he finished? But Ascoli, he played yeah, but it's amazing, really. I think that's phenomenal. I have a huge amount of respect for players who go and prove themselves in a different type of form, in a different league. And there was no league as strong and is testing at the time than the Italian Serie A. So when I talk about Ronnie was a player I saw. He's the youngest to me. I would have seen a lot more of Ronnie play, and Ronnie was a brilliant midfield player. John, for different reasons, I haven't seen as much of John, but I've read enough and spoke to enough people and seen enough to get an appreciation of how good John was. But I just think Liam's career path in terms of what he achieved, his time in Italy, and the impression that he made over there. For me, of those three players in that position, I'd probably just lean ever so slightly towards Liam in that respect of those players. So if you're looking at it, ask me to give. But before I put forward Liam Brady as my most outstanding North Dublin player of all time, Yakety Yak, I want to throw forward someone else who wouldn't, I'd imagine, be in people's thoughts. Because like I said, for me, it's very much position specific. So there's a player I played with, for me, is as good as anything player I've played with. And I didn't see much better at the time I was playing football. And Stephen Carr. I never played with Stephen at club football. I only played him at international football. And Stephen, for me, when he was fit and playing, there was nobody better. I didn't play with, or at times didn't see a better fullback than Stephen Carr. Stephen Carr had everything in terms. In the modern game, we're so used to talking about fullback zone, their kind of attacking qualities, how productive they are in the opposition half, the pitch, goals, assists. And it's almost a given that, well, they can't really defend. If they can kind of defend to a basic level, it's a bonus. Stephen Carr could do everything. Stephen Carr was a very good defender, very tenacious, great 1v1, could never be beaten, ridiculously quick, strong, physically strong, good positional sense as well. So as a centre-half, if you had Stephen on your right-hand side, you knew you were cruising, because any ball over your shoulder, be around on the cover, that kind of recovery speed was phenomenal. I actually played over the other side of the pitch by and large to Stephen, but he was a fantastic defender and he was great going forward in terms of crosses into the box, being productive in the opposition half the pitch as well. The problem with Stephen was he had a number of bad injuries during the course of his career on at Spurs, Newcastle in particular when he went up there. But Stephen was another one of those players for me, just time. If the timing had been better from Jordan's career, he could have stepped into the best club teams in the world. I'm talking about the very best in England, Spain, Italy, and wouldn't have looked out of his depth. He would have actually excelled. He was an absolutely brilliant fullback.
That's huge praise, Kenny. Like, this is a slight tangent, but I realised we never put this to you at the time. We were doing our best Ireland 11 from the Premier League era, and it ended up being a battle between Steve Finnan and Seamus Coleman for the right-back slot. By the sounds of things, you would have Stephen Carr in there.
Oh, easily.
Right.
Easily in there. I was just going to say, at that time, he actually had fierce competition in that Ireland team. Gaz Kelly was there when I first came in. Steve Finnan was a wonderful, accomplished fullback. Even Jeff Kenn, who never gets a mention, I played with Berryman. Jeff was a lovely footballer. In a different era, probably would have got another 30, 40 caps. Jeff. Seamus I didn't play with. But Stephen, for me, when he was at his best, and when he was fit for a period of time playing, for me, possibly Stephen would have the edge on all of those fullbacks. He was absolutely powerful. I'm surprising people don't appreciate it. Stephen wasn't the most media friendly during the course of his career. Shied away from the cameras, never gave interviews. Bit of a miserable git, to be honest. That was the perception. That was the perception of him. It really was, chip in his shoulder, Sarah Rowe, puss on him, blah, won't do an interview. That's how I got the impression. That's not obviously how his teammates saw him, although he could be a little bit miserable on occasion, don't get me wrong. Probably only time I saw him smile was probably 2-3 years ago when he popped in to do an interview with Sky. He was a little bit more media friendly. But his game, was absolutely frightening. He was so quick. He had low centre of gravity, ideal build for a fullback for me. Kind of low centre of gravity, powerful like legs and midriff, upper body as well. He was a good, really good professional, kind of dedicated, time in the gym in terms of physical conditioning. And like I said, his defending was great. Probably a little bit too tenacious at times, picked up quite a few yellow cards, I would have thought, during the course of his career. But I love that. I love to see a fullback with an appetite to go and win his tackles and not to get beaten in 1v1s. Take a real pride in that. You don't see enough of that in the modern game. Those players are few and far between. But Stephen had it. He was absolutely a fierce competitor. And like I said, going forward, lovely technique, dribbling ability, and great delivery into the box. He had a wonderful ping of a ball. I don't know if you remember the goal. He got a famous goal against United, I think it was, White Hart Lane. 35 yards, he pinged it into the top corner. It was like match of the day goal of the season contender. It was a brilliant goal. He was that good of a striker of the ball. Him and Stephen Reid are probably two of the best strikers the ball ever played with in terms of hitting the balls through the laces over distance, like really precise. He really was that good. And it was only injuries. He stints out of the game for long chunks. And Stephen actually retired after Newcastle. People don't realise Eoin. And he went back to Dublin to live in Dublin. He was playing golf down at Portmarnock Links most days, and he got a phone call to go back to Birmingham. And obviously I know a bit more of this. I know people up in Birmingham. I used to play there. I was gone at the time. But he went back after Christmas. He just went over there for a month's trial. And that month's trial, they extended it to the end of the season. He made such an impression going over there in that few months. They got promoted that season. He stayed there, was made captain, 9th in the Premiership the following year, and led him to the Carling Cup. He's an absolute legend up at Birmingham. He's in the best ever Birmingham 11. And he'd actually retired and come out of retirement to play up there. But I remember watching him play up in Birmingham, and the level he was playing at up there was absolutely free. He was more experienced player there, possibly even a better defender in some respects. But he was that good. He was that. I'd compare him to Seamus in terms of Seamus was at a level I felt maybe 4 or 5 years ago. If the timing had been better, I'd make the argument for Seamus Coleman could have played in any team in the world, Madrid, Barcelona, any of the top Italian teams. He was playing good. Just the time and contract, whatever it was, he stayed where he was at Everton, and kind of the opportunity passed him by. Probably a little bit similar to Stephen. Maybe his injury record went against. When he left Tottenham, he spent 10 years there and went to Newcastle. For me, again, could have played for any top teams in the world. He really was. He really was that good. I think Dennis is probably regarded as our finest ever, maybe fullback, and I'd never argue that. But I'd always make an argument for Stephen alongside Dennis, tantalisingly close to Dennis, because when he was on his game and he was fit, he was absolutely powerful player.
It's remarkable, Kenny, because I think everybody remembers how good he was, but I don't think we've heard too often just how good he was. I don't think people rate him generally as high as you put him there. I think it's pretty clear that he is underrated if that's really how good he was. So Stephen Carr, a great left field shout that I didn't actually expect to come up today. You've gone through Liam Brady already. Just one other quick mention on John Giles. Did you remember watching him play at all at any point, even when he came back to play in the League of Ireland?
No, I never saw John. I never saw John play. Even Liam, I've only got small recollections. That cup final was in '79. He played that instrumental role, wasn't it? Was against Sunderland. They won Arsenal. Vaguely remember some snippets of that, and I've seen a little bit more footage of Liam over the years, just because John was that little bit far removed in terms of the time that he played. But again, you speak to enough players, and I suppose you lean on other players a lot who played in that era, who played the game, and people whose opinions you respect. And when they're consistently saying the same things about the likes of Liam and Johnny Giles, you pretty much take it as face value. I've been lucky enough to work with those lads in the media, predominantly up in RTE, and it's been great and have the opportunity to have a good conversation with John over the years and Liam. And possibly I didn't take the opportunity maybe to speak enough really about when they played. You don't like to pry too much, like you listen to them when they speak, so you get a bit of a flavour of the times and when they played. But it's pretty obvious in terms of the qualities which John had. Different type of player to Liam. Liam was a bit more box to box, up and down the pitch, a bit more mobile. I think that kind of dribbling ability. John, you always struck me as more of a playmaker, sitting there and control the game from a slightly different area, a deeper position on the pitch, but two still highly influential on the pitch. Just different types, but I think he can. It's easier to have that argument, Liam, John, and Ronnie, because they occupy this central area of the pitch. And I know people say, Stephen, what are you talking about, Stephen Carr? You can talk with Stephen Carr and Liam Brady. I'm not saying Stephen Carr was as good a player as Liam Brady, but I just don't think you can have the argument so easy. All I'm saying is, in his area of the pitch, Stephen Carr, he absolutely excelled. He was as good as anything I've played, or actually I've seen. I can't say great fullbacks in the modern game. Danny Alves, I say it springs to a lot of people's minds on. Maybe of my age, your age even. Great world-class fullback. So would that be a fair comment? Danny Alves might be up there, a lot of people's top fullback, maybe top 3 of the last 10 years. But I tell you now, I take Stephen Carr ahead of Danny Alves any day of the week. Stephen Carr's
really?
Oh, absolutely. Stephen Carr was a far better defender than Danny Alves. Danny Alves' stats going forward, maybe in terms of kind of goals scored and probably assists, probably superior. But as an all-round player, excuse me, I apologise for that. As an all-round player, which I value an awful lot in the full-back area of the pitch in terms of their defensive strengths and their attacking strengths of an equal measure, for me, Stephen Carr was a better player. I'd have Stephen Carr in my team all day of the week. And that's not because of the fact he was born half a mile down the road in Dublin either. That's a pretty impartial opinion.
The cherry on top is never something we shy away from here. Ronnie Whelan, Frank Stapleton, David O'Leary are the other 3 you've mentioned outside of Carr, Brady, Giles. Is there anything you want to say about them? Any particular memories that take them to this level where when you think about Northside footballers, they are one of the first names on the tip of your tongue?
No, I don't think there's much more I can say. A lot of people would have seen Ronnie play. I always feel as if the biggest compliment Ronnie, I hear from the chit chat about Ronnie, came from Graham Souness. I've heard Graham Souness talk a number of times when he's asked to pick the team he'd want around him, his best 11 of players he played with and he saw. He always picks Ronnie. Ronnie's the first one he picks along something. He played with some amazing players, world-class players. He went over to Italy as well. Always, doesn't even have to think about it. Ronnie Whelan's the first one. So that's good enough for me. If a player of Graham Souness's quality elects to put Ronnie Whelan alongside him, that says everything for me. Ronnie had pretty much everything: goal scoring, playmaker ability. He had a bit of devilment in him as well, Ronnie. You wouldn't physically impose yourself on Ronnie Whelan either. So I don't think I have to add too much in terms of Ronnie Whelan and Johnny Giles, even Liam to an extent. I think we're splitting hairs and when we start to dissect their individual ability, like I said, it was just that career path, Liam's career path, and what he achieved over in Italy for me, which I find hugely impressive, and for me maybe just gives him the edge on those two other players. And probably why, if you're asking me for that one Dublin Northside player who I'd put forward, it probably would be Liam for those reasons.
Liam Brady is the selection then if you were to pick one, but I think we've just got to build a mountain for Stephen Carr's different expressions alone and put 4 different Stephen Carrs up on the mountain, because clearly you've waxed lyrical about him today. Kenny Cunningham, great stuff. Thanks a million for breaking down some of the football candidates from North Dublin.
Cheers, our pleasure.
All right, let's go to Sean Potts for the view from the Piper's Corner jury. Sean, how are you?
Very good, Jer.
So this is very difficult. We've, myself and Eoin, obviously, it's in our interest to split Dublin, to get this conversation going properly. We all think that Dublin has become too big of a beast, and this is proof. Too many, a festoon of great sporting people that we should be carving into a mountain. Too many people for anyone.
The transparency of your agenda was quite pathetic, actually.
So just let's establish your credentials. You're a proper Northside Dub. You've been in the Northside Dub for your whole life. Is that were you
born and bred? Yeah. I grew up on the Navan Road and moved into town, then eventually to Marino. I live just off the Malahide Road now. So yeah, I spent my life on the north side of Dublin.
And who were your sporting heroes as a kid?
Very much the Dublin football. I was a Leeds United fan as a kid, and then Dublin won the All-Ireland final in '74. So my mother was actually an unapologetic band woman. So I was playing soccer with Bar boys, and when it came to actually signing properly for them, she wouldn't let me. So it was old-fashioned stuff. So it was hauled up with sunkets, you know. So then Dublin won the All-Ireland in '74. It very much transformed the sporting landscape in the city from children's perspective and just the perspective of supporters and fans and being drawn into something, you know. My heroes on that Dublin team, probably David Hickey and Brian Mullins. Brian Mullins remained a hero of mine throughout my life because I just thought he was the rock on which they built that team, you know. And Kevin Heffernan was such an iconic leader. So that we were steeped in that. We were very lucky to be, you know, fortunate to, you know, to be a child during that era. It's a very influential period of their lives. Now, having said that, none of them have made it onto Mount Rushmore, but they were my childhood heroes and remain so. And I think David Hickey, if you broaden the scope or criteria of Mount Rushmore, and I'm also conscious that you're probably sick to death of Mount Rushmore at this stage. It's very much a lockdown thing, but just to get to the end of it, David Hickey would certainly figure very prominently because I always consider him one of the great Irishmen. He was an exemplary figure in terms of what an amateur footballer was, and you know, to reach the peak he did as an athlete, but also then to contribute so much to our society in terms of being the first kidney transplant in Ireland, and to be such a sort of influential figure in the world of Irish medicine, and a no shrink of violet when it came to asserting his views about society in general. But a fantastic leader, fantastic Irishman, and my wife was very fortunate to work with him for a while in Beaumont Hospital, and she's never stopped talking about him since.
I think that stuff is important. Like, you know, ultimately you get to pick your own. So I can see why you'd have somebody like David Hickey on. Can I just go back to one thing? You said you're a Leeds fan. Does that mean John Giles is on your list? Because we had Kenny Cunningham on just there, and he was picking. He's obviously Northsider as well. He put Liam Brady ahead of Giles.
Oh my God. No, not really, because I'm sort of much as like my mother, I became an unapologetic GA person subsequently. So while I still always keep an eye out for Leeds and very much enjoyed the last run in this year, albeit without fans, because I think that actually contributed in getting over the line in the end. I've had to stop just short of picking 4 GA men on my Mount Rushmore, and out of magnanimity, I went for a GA child as in Corey Carrington, because I just can't ignore his contribution on the world stage of sports, you know, to win back-to-back opens, and you know, the son of a GA man, and indeed he tells a great story of Mark and Desi Farrell in schools matching in Croke Park, where he actually holds his hand up and says Desi destroyed him during that game. But I think Desi counters that somewhat. But wonderful Dublin sports character, great humble man, very ordinary guy. I've been fortunate to meet him a couple of times when we worked with him in the Gaelic Players Association. But I think he's been a wonderful ambassador for sport. No more than Shane Lowry, I think his background contributes to that, and I think, that's some of the power of sort of amateur sport as well, that they're drawn back to the like amateur hurling and football, both of them, and but I couldn't, I think, in all conscience, pick 4 Dublin sports people without picking Harrington.
Are we considering Patrick Harrington an Northsider here?
I'm not picking Northsiders. This is a.
Oh, I see.
This is a fabricated. This is fabricated list on the fact that
honestly, it's not. It isn't. I'll tell you what we're doing. We're picking 4. We're going to do 4 from the north, 4 from the south, and then there'll be a final mountain at the end. There is a final day, so we are legitimately looking for the best Northsiders, and I'm fairly sure Harrington's going to make a cut the whole way through. So, do you legitimately have 4 Northsiders? Would that be possible?
No, I don't, because Harrington's Southsider. But I'm trying to think of the other 3. No, of 2 Southsiders, 2 Northsiders.
So you've got Cluxton. Am I saying you've got Cluxton and Heffernan? Are they 2?
No, I have Cluxton.
Right.
My third was Kevin Moran.
Okay. I think there's going to be a strong case made for Kevin Moran. Brian Carr is doing the needful on Thursday.
Okay. I think you got to, the criteria for your Mount Rushmore is purely subjective on my part. But anyway, I think no one will ever do what Moran did again. It's just a remarkable story. He was on with you guys there a couple of weeks ago. I was listening to him, and I never stopped listening to his story because I could listen to it for the rest of my life. To achieve what he did, think about it. He signed for United like in the spring of, I think, 1978, and to play in the All-Ireland final later that year, just coming back the week before the game, like just walked straight back into the squad and straight back onto the team. To have the United manager sitting in the stand while Moran was getting battered on the field, essentially, split head, torn hamstring, it's the stuff of childhood kind of dreams, and he encapsulated that. And no one has really ever been able to let that go. A wonderful character to go on then and 10 brilliant years with United, as tough as nails, credible athlete, a wonderful character. Some of the stories he recounts, particularly when he was playing with Ireland, they needed a draw with Holland, and they essentially decided they were going to play out the game with the Dutch and to knock the ball around, and all of a sudden the ball was passed to him from Mick McCarthy, and he turned around, hang on a second, we'd never passed the ball to each other ever. So they knocked it back down the other end, told Van Basten, the lads, you knock it among yourselves. We don't want to, But brilliant character, a credible footballer, very dashing, It added a great dynamic to Heffernan's, lifelong desire to actually defeat Kerry. I mean, Heffer was absolutely obsessed with beating Kerry, and Moran became a very intrinsic part of that. I think even in the first few minutes of the All-Ireland final in '76, he laid down a marker. It's an awful pity he didn't score one of those dashing goals, because he missed both of them where he ran the length of the field. But nonetheless, I couldn't. He always comes back when I'm talking about heroes, sporting heroes, to somebody who has achieved to span those 2 great feats.
So he was a really good footballer as well as being a successful soccer player. I think probably that aspect of the career might not be as widely talked about, primarily because that team goes on and has more success even after he leaves, and also because the fact is he's part of the '88 team, that creates history from an Irish perspective, and maybe so I don't really fully understand myself just how good a Gaelic footballer he was.
Well, we only had that number of short years, but he was very much part of Heffo's technique of putting Kerry on the back foot. Heffo's plan to put Kerry on the back foot in '76. He, by his own admission, he said he was a better Gaelic footballer than a soccer player, but that might be only just playing down his success as a soccer player. He was certainly hard. He was incredibly athletic, fast, and powerful, and he went on to prove that throughout his professional career. He was brilliant in the box. He was a brilliant centre half. He put his head in where it mattered. And I think, he said technically he wasn't very gifted as a soccer player. And he realised that when he went over. But he was certainly as hard and as fit as the United players at the time when he first went over. But I can only remember as an incredibly dashing a halfback. When I was 9 years of age when like he came to prominence, and it was short-lived. But he was very much for that run alone. And I think there was years ago when they picked the greatest sporting moment of all time. I think it was Michael Donlan's run became the greatest. Only in the J could we pick a run, but actually it was a great score. It was a great score at the end of it. But he had he nailed one of those scores, it would have been it's never been forgotten. But anyway, it was very much laying down the mark at Kerry in '76, and he was wonderful again in the '77 semi-final against Kerry. And he probably wasn't as well tuned in when they played in '78. It's quite remarkable when you think of it. Imagine just dropping in on the Tuesday or Wednesday before the All-Ireland final and actually just rejoining the panel, and then to actually play a sneaky game out in New York the following year, and he's still playing with Manchester United in the Sister Concilio or whatever match. But I think they knocked the sugar out of each other in New York, Dublin, and Kerry. So I think he was part of that as well. So.
It's mad that they kill each other even in the friendlies. Okay, so Kevin Moran is on your mountain. Technically, we're going to deal with him on the south side stuff. Who are your Northsiders? Give us your Northsiders at least that we can 100% nailed on.
Okay. Stephen Cluxton has been arguably the most significant Gaelic footballer, if not of the modern era of all time. He revolutionised the game. I suppose he's fortunate as an athlete to have spent now 19 years playing at the top level. But he helped. He was part of what I would consider sort of a perfect storm for Dublin's opponents, and certainly what kickstarted this incredible period of Dublin dominance in Gaelic football. There was three brilliant managers came together at the one time, or certainly overlapping. Pat Gilroy broke the mould, as it were. At least he changed what was considered an unsuccessful culture in Dublin football, in that there was plenty of talent and a lot of dash, but they seemed to be sort of plagued with hubris and individuality, and that's one of the criticisms from great footballers and people who made, like all Gaelic footballers, huge commitment and sacrifice to perform at the top level. But in terms of getting over the line and sort of breaking that dominance of Kerry and Tyrone in the previous decade, Gilroy really instigated that change. But he then brought in a number of players who had already been through the hands of Jim Gavin, then under 21 manager, and at the same time Desi Farrell was moulding a new breed of young players at minor level. And I think you got three incredibly gifted and talented people in charge of inter-county football in Dublin during that period, and I think it all sort of fed into each other. Like beating Kerry in 2011, albeit with a late rally, and they're the margins you're working off. It transformed the mindset of a group of already talented young players who had tasted success. So Gilroy actually, that achievement was absolutely enormous. And then Gavin's come into that. But just at that period, we actually struggled. One of the drawbacks we had in the 2000s was the absence of good free takers, and Bernard Brogan was good from close range, but Cluxton's contribution for dead ball kicking from distance was a huge and contributory factor to Dublin getting over the line. But his leadership in terms of, I think it was Gilroy changed the name of kickouts to possession restarts, and the possession game was starting to kick in and become the tactical approach of choice at that level. And his kicking ability is extraordinary. To be able to put out the ball like he did and pick out from different ranges, and then modify that as the game changed, because the game changes so quickly and has even front of us all. Be able to change that and various kicks, and then to become the sort of fulcrum of the whole sort of team in terms of driving it. His commitment to practice and to being the very best he can, I have no doubt has been an enormous inspiration to those around him. I think what we don't always see, and it may be trite in some way, but we talk about the sacrifices that are made, and there's debates about advantages for counties and all that stuff. But you leave it aside, the sacrifice that he has made for nearly 2 decades of his life to be as good as he possibly could be. And don't forget, was part of a team that was unsuccessful for a period and suffered a lot of setbacks, you know?
Yeah. I think that bit's actually almost as impressive as anything. So I was just looking it up there. In 2011, he just turned 30, I think, around the time of the All-Ireland final. And when you think about that, like his greatness, because that's obviously one of the seasons where he's at his most impactful, but it's after that, like, that he just gets better and better and better. At a stage when most intercounty players are like, okay, I've got my All-Ireland one, I'm in my 30s, I'm going to go off now and see what else is out there. It's the longevity is something as well on top of this. I think that, you know, when you're chasing somebody on the mountain.
Yeah, he got better during the period when the focus was sharpening on his own performances. Like as the keeper became and driven by his sort of pioneering role as an athlete within Gaelic games, like as the game was changing, the focus was sharpening on him all the time. Kerry were obsessed with it, in inverted commas, going to say cracking him, you know, and claimed to have cracked him a couple of times, which they did. They put a press on him, but his response to those sort of pressurized situations is what has marked him apart. And there are a number of wonderful keepers who followed in his footsteps in the game today and would very much look to him as the standard bearer in that regard, because he is a pioneering footballer. But he as the pressure was increasing on him all the time, he got better. And even when he did, you know, when Rourke then emerged as a senior footballer and relieved him, I'm sure, thankfully, in his part from the free-taking duties, he still managed to vary his game, to develop, to become better, to respond to, you know, saving a couple of penalties in the last 2 championships, including in last year's drawing game. Just doing its fundamental goalkeeping duties, you know. Like, and you see, I mean, even when Kerry I tried over a number of years to hit that long diagonal ball, which is always favoured by them, how solid he is behind it, you know, and how, you know, and look, your goalkeeper is absolutely fundamental. It always was, but actually in today's game, more important than ever.
Okay, I think there's people, in terms of if there's only going to be one Gaelic football representative in the final decision, Cluxton's right there. I would have said alongside Heppo. Why is Heppo not on yours as a matter of interest?
Oh, I don't know. I can't, because I've only tried to pick 4. Again, he was the man that broke the mold, and I think in terms of his leadership, I just probably to do with contemporary athletes and knowing these guys and seeing them firsthand. If I was just to whittle it down, that's the only reason. It's purely because I think Jim Gavin has certainly matched Heppo's managerial contribution. I think, you know, 2 of them of their era. Kevin as a manager in the 70s changed the culture. Gavin, extraordinary achievement to you know, to remain as unflappable and his attention to detail during the years, and to delegate and oversee sort of great tacticians in his management team has been wonderful. But in the middle of that, I'd still rank Pat Gilroy's achievements alongside both those managers, because Gilroy, again, like Heffo, getting the breakthrough in '74, that breakthrough in 2011, you know, if that Gooch puts them 4 ahead or 5 ahead with a free, it could have been 5 ahead, and things just peter out for them. The script might not have ended up the way it was. You know, you do need to get that breakthrough. The sort of the confidence that comes with a team from winning. I think Heffo, Gilroy, and Jim Gavin and Dave, they understand the importance of winning. Sometimes we're talking about sport nowadays because it's about inclusivity and, you know, children's sport and moving away from the ultra competitive stuff at a young age, which is all very, very important. But at some point that has to stop. And like Gaelic football at the top level is about being better than the other crowd. And I think that all those managers were driven by that. They're all competitive athletes themselves. Heffo, a wonderful footballer, incredible record himself at club and county. But I just think I just wanted to pick players who really moved me over the years, and that's why I would have picked Cluxton. It draws me on to the last of my Mount Rushmore selection, which is a true outsider.
Yeah,
James McCarthy. James McCarthy.
Right.
James McCarthy's become my favourite footballer for a lot of reasons, and a team of full of absolute legendary footballers. The reason being that he, despite being a phenomenal athlete, a tremendous footballer, hard as nails, great ability to drive a team, it's showing up when you absolutely most need him. And I think because Dublin have been so dominant, the closeness of those battles over the years, especially with Mayo, are sometimes overlooked. I know they're not generally overlooked, but they were on a precipice for so many. But particularly the 2015 semi-final replay, where again I think Lee Keegan had missed a chance and McCarthy could then punish from the other end of the field. 2017 final, last 10 minutes. McCarthy usually shows, even in the Kerry games last year, he shows during that critical period where the game's actually being won. Phenomenal, like that. Great players do that, of course, and that's what marks him, in my view, apart. In fact, a recent gathering of friends, prompted by the Mount Rushmore series, when we were picking our favourite sort of athletes of all time, I wouldn't be afraid to pick a Gaelic footballer just because the game is a domestic game and doesn't have an international outlet. McCarthy for me would be one of those players who ranks alongside the likes of Roy Keane and stuff in football who showed when it mattered most. And not only that, he's been detailed with a lot of hard jobs over the years when, you know, he's sort of deputised in midfield, although he's an actual sort of wing back or centre back, but he's deputised in there, and he's often put on the player that needs to be quietened. And so a lot of McCarthy's work is just that absolutely grueling, running somebody into the ground. And even if you watch him with David Moran in last season's replay, a lot of the dummy runs, a lot of the work off the ball is all McCarthy, before, of course, showing up in that last critical 10-minute period with a couple of points.
I know you're trying to rail against the narrative of a North versus South GAA thing here, but I don't know what your worry is. Like, I mean, that North Dublin list of candidates is clearly going to win 5 in a row alone. Like, I mean,
well, as a Kerry man, I certainly won't be lectured by a Kerry man on whether Dublin should be. This debate should be. If I was to face my cousins in good counsel, my first cousins, my uncle's family have always been involved in football, hurling, and Cook Council, and the thought that we would be going to Croke Park as rivals is unconscionable, quite frankly.
It's fair enough.
Don't worry, I can't see it happening, but you know, like, anyway, we all live near neighbours who we have to go to war with. If so, your subs essentially Brian Mullins, David Hickey. Who else was close to making your?
David Hickey and Brian Mullins as players, you know. Giles would have been a hero of mine as a child for sure, if to be more magnanimous in sporting terms. I don't know enough. I'm not a follower of rugby, so I'll hold my hands up. I know Driscoll's going to come into the reckoning here. He's an incredible athlete and incredibly brave and fearless as a warrior at top level sport. But it's not a game I follow very closely, so I couldn't attest to his greatness in the rugby context, other than you know, received wisdom. He's a brilliant player, but certainly in Gaelic football terms, Hickey and Mullins were childhood heroes of mine. I've maintained that narrative about great managers, and I will go back to obviously Kevin Heffernan, because he broke the mould in '74, and he engendered that. You often hear the debate in Gaelic football or hurling about, we put in the same effort as the top teams, we make the same sacrifices, and at a certain level there's a truth to that, and I understand that there's guys travelling up and down from the country for training and all, but if you tease this out with some managers who've gone to some of the smaller counties to train them, who were involved, for example, with stronger counties, you'll often find quietly the story coming back that some of the players are not actually performing or preparing at the same level as their counterparts in the stronger counties. I think Heffo brought that into Dublin in '74. he changed regime. His training regime was brutal. In context of 73, 74. Dublin players were languishing. The famous Gay O'Driscoll story about playing for Dublin on a Sunday and going into work and not letting anyone know he played for Dublin the day before. I mean, nobody knew he worked because he was sort of embarrassed about their performances at the time. But so he changed, and I think all great teams have been driven by managers like that. Mick O'Dwyer was no different. Mick O'Dwyer was absolutely obsessive about winning, about being the best, and it wasn't some pastiche thing about how wonderful Kerry was. I was very close friends with Paddy O'Shea, and he always spoke about how they became very. They were insular, like they were sort of separated from their fans. They were separated from. This was about them as a group being better than everybody else, and so I think Hefo certainly engendered Dublin with that. Pat Gilroy then did it in 2009, 2010, and into 2011. He changed the culture. There's a lot of stories about how he you know, they were hammered by Meath in that Leinster Championship game. They shipped 5 goals. I think there was a number of you know, set up experiments on the go at the time with the panel. And I think he went back to the panel and said, right lads, you know, this is gonna, it has to work this way, where we work tirelessly in all areas of the field to win, to get over the line, and we don't, under pressurized situations, revert to individuality. We're a collective, and that work rate goes to a new level. And the first signs of that actually were there to be seen in 2010, where they actually, for the first time, I think in 15 years, bet one of the top teams, and they actually defeated Tyrone. I think they defeated Armagh the back door before going on, but actually defeating Tyrone, who albeit were on the wane at the time, a huge breakthrough. And again, Jim Gavin and Desi Farrell then both involved at underage level. Look at the players that came through their hands. I mean, the ones that Desi had from like the likes of Kieran Kilkenny and Carr McCoslow, Jack McCaffrey, he had them at development squad level. So he was. I'm not saying they didn't have innate talent, but that's only part of the story. They were going through the hands of very forward-looking managers, and I think all of them would imbue their players with that idea that, you know, sacrifice is something that you must deal with. You have to work it into your life, both off the field and on the field. That, like, the sacrifices you're making as a young man, for example, on one of those teams, with all your, you know, people doing the normal things that young people do. The sacrifice you're making is something worth doing in terms of your lived experience, and not to be too wishy-washy about it. I think all those managers would look on football that way, and you know, and I think the signs are on it then when you see their behaviour, you know, on and off the field. They play to the whistle, and they're never really beaten. Their contribution, as you can see off the field, is tremendous. They're a wonderful bunch of characters, and I know there's a strain with the media that they're not accessible because they see the long-term goal in terms of. I understand it creates a kind of attention, but it's something that it doesn't bother the players. I don't think, you know.
They're relatively accessible by comparison to some other counties. One character we haven't spoken about in the middle of all this is Mickey Whelan, who ties those two generations of teams together. It's a direct link from Hefo to Pat Gilroy, and that he was on the sideline for both of them, and kind of was probably one of the inspirations for that brutal strength and conditioning campaign that you were talking about in the 70s as well. He's not going to make the list. He's obviously not at that level, but like, I think when you start to get into, in particular, the Dublin Gaelic football team, that there are a few sets of fingerprints that are on it that are consistent over the period of time, and he's clearly been kind of the godfather in some ways of Dublin football from the 70s all the way through.
Yeah, he was. I suppose when he did get a chance as manager, he was probably ahead of the game. You know, he was. I know Desi Farrell is on the record of saying that he probably gave the players too much leeway and he trusted them too much, and that the whip hand probably wasn't applied as it should have been probably in '96. You know, in the wake of winning the All-Ireland in 95. But, you know, he was a wonderful footballer himself, of course. And he went to America and he learned his trade. And he was always looking at the development of the athlete. I mean, he's the living proof of continuous sort of professional development, because he's still going, and remarkable character, wonderful man, and a hugely influential figure. I think in again that breakthrough with GIlroy. It's no surprise that GIlroy looked to Mickey to contribute to that Dublin team, and even had him back again with the hurlers when during his brief spell in charge there. I think there was strain with Heffo in the 70s. I think after the 75, finally, I think he criticised Heffo for that the team are fit enough, you know, and you know, so he was very, you know, he had great foresight in terms of sport development, and I think it was a pity that the game was lagging behind even the mid 90s. I think from what Mickey really was trying to achieve, and I think he came into his own with GIlroy as the game was modernising, and you know, he had this wonderful bunch of sort of athletes to work with, who probably bought into the sort of modern way of sport, as it were.
Yeah. Okay. Well, look, there's going to be a crowd of Southsiders nominating 4 Southsiders for us tomorrow here, Sean. So, and they're going to be naming Harrington for sure, and probably Kevin Moran as well. So you're giving up 2 slots for 2 of your people.
As I said from the outset here, I'm not buying into this contrived split of our county. My mother will disown me if I do. Both my parents were born. Well, they're born in the south inner city, so they're both. They're
going to have Harrington. They're going to have Harrington on their mountain, and okay, grand. We can grandfather in a few after later on, because Brady as the footballer was interesting from Kenny Cunningham. I don't know if you've got a view on the hierarchy of Northside football, because I think Paul McGrath should actually be on Dublin's Mount Rushmore. I think that, like, for his achievement. Tournaments.
I think when the debate started first, and I must say the Mount Rushmore thing did get us through the first couple of months of the lockdown very well, because it prompted some great debates. But actually, more McGrath was in many of the selections at the time for his achievement, just because he was just a philosopher on the field, and some of his performance, both certainly for Villa and Ireland, were just extraordinary, you know, and Man United in the early days. But I just can't look past the sport that I'm obsessed with. I mean, there's no hurlers have been mentioned at all, you know, so I get stick for that behind the scenes. But anyway, I just think that they're the players that sort of resonate with me. I mean, as this Dublin football team continues to unfold, there are many others like Dean Rock and Kieran Kilkenny, extraordinary individuals. Like again, a great time for wonderful characters in the game like Ger Brennan, and only too delighted to see that he's got one over on Rathnew down in Wicklow in his first outing. But Ger again was he sums up the sort of part of what was changed in Dublin, you know, making the very, very much like Pádraig Harrington and Greg Harrington, like the very, very best of his talent, you know, and you know, so a lot of great and another Northsider.
Not a single Nafina player mentioned here. I'm astounded.
Excuse me, I spoke about Dougie Farrell sort of non-stop.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. So it's a lot of Vincent's Heads and somebody from Parnell's and Kevin Moore and Pádraig Harrington. And
I'm not going to play and Johnny Cooper.
No room for Dermot Connolly at the moment, anyway. Well, listen, Sean, you've been great with your time. Thanks very much for breaking the rules. But great to have you. And those are the votes of the Piper's Corner jury. Thanks a million.
OTB AM's Mount Rushmore.
So just to reiterate, the 4 names on North Dublin's Mount Rushmore, which will be going ahead for selection on Thursday. We're going to do the South Dublin tomorrow, and then the full one, which is North versus South and how they merge together, are going to be Brian O'Driscoll, John Giles, Liam Brady and Stephen Cluxton. They're the 4 names that are going forward after our various selections and selectors. We've come together and through the algorithm have come up with Giles, O'Driscoll, Cluxton and Liam Brady are going ahead from the Northside, and we'll see what the Southside put up on tomorrow's show. 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number if you want to get involved in that conversation. I do want to remind you, though, today on the OTB Sports app, which is available in the App Store and in the Google Play Store, you just search OTB Sports and you'll get it. From 12 o'clock, it's a Jack Charlton special. We'll be playing you out all of the best highlights of the various people that we've spoken to, paying due deference and testimony and remembering and enjoying and luxuriating over the career that Jack Charlton had as the manager of the Republic of Ireland. And then at 12:30, we'll also be playing Put Him Under Pressure. So if you want some Jack Charlton goodness coming your way, then tune in to OTB Sports Radio. Just tell Alexa or Google Home to play OTB Sports Radio and tune in, and away you go. Off the Ball's back from 7 o'clock tonight. And a reminder as well that the latest episode of Alan Quinlan's How's the Head is coming up with the Dublin footballer Shane Carthy. That episode 4 airs exclusively today on the OTB Sports app at 2 o'clock. So that's the place to get that, and we'll see you tomorrow. Bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. Best of luck.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters.